Chapter 173. What was the scene when over 6,000 talismans, which were equivalent to the full-force strike of a Jin Dan human immortal, exploded at the same time? Wu Qi had no idea, and he could not care less about it. In any case, he brought the catfish flood dragon and plunged into the ground, transforming into a stream of earth and mist and flying towards the Lake of Four Waters at top speed. However, for Yingzheng and his men who stayed above ground, it was a catastrophe that nearly wiped them out. 6,000 talismans exploded at the same time, sucking away all the natural energies within 100-mile circumference in an instant. It was a chain reaction that caused a disturbance in natural energies, just like the chain reaction of a nuclear warhead. 6,000 talismans were compressed into a golden ball of light, measuring about 10 feet in circumference. 5 talisman treasures spun rapidly around the golden ball for a while, then exploded with a loud boom. Thunder, lightning, flame, poisonous flame, and all sorts of attacks of 5 elements were gone. It was a complete energy explosion. The energies of 5 elements were transformed into the most violent, frightening force that was close to the chaos, and exploded right in front of Yingzheng and his men. A towering beam of red light rose into the sky, while tens of mushroom clouds rose from the nearby mountains. Along with the dazzling light and the strong wind, the mountains within a radius of 10 miles were instantly turned into nothingness, and the ground caved in, leaving a huge crater. When the talismans and talisman treasures exploded, the faces of Yingzheng and his men twisted. Baiqi leaped up and stood before Yingzheng, his armor emitting a blinding light and shielding both of them. The explosion knocked both of them far away, making them sink deep into a lofty mountain. After that, the lofty mountain crumbled to pieces, and both of them were knocked flying away once again. Apart from those earth immortals who were protected by magical treasures, nearly 100 Qin soldiers with the cultivation base of Jin Dan were instantly vaporized. Not even their souls could escape from the explosion. Bai Qitian, who was also near the center of the explosion, abruptly spurted out a shadow of a black flood dragon, which wrapped around his body and carried him away. In just 3 seconds, the violent ripples of natural energies in the surroundings had shattered the black flood dragon, but Bai Qitian had already escaped. The shadow of this black flood dragon was a life-saving dragon energy that Yingzheng had personally injected into Baiqi's body after Baiqi had rendered some meritorious service, and it had indeed saved his life today. Su Fu and Li Si, who were standing on the top of a mountain far away, looked at the chaotic scene, as if they had lost their parents. They could not even get close to the explosion point, and they shrieked, "Your Majesty! Your Majesty!" The warlocks and soldiers were also in a panic. They looked blankly at the area, which looked like the end of the world. Their bodies trembled, and cold sweat kept coming out of their bodies. Yingzheng was the sky of the Daqin dynasty and the ground of the Daqin dynasty. If anything happened to him, the Daqin dynasty would definitely fall apart. While Su Fu and Li Si were screaming in panic, Yingzheng's voice was heard coming from afar, "Shut up. I'm not dead yet, and I don't need you to cry here. Li Xian, did I ask you to lie by the side to watch the show? Where's your marksmanship? Where's your bow? Where are your arrows?" Following Yingzheng's loud roar, a general clad in a silver armor and carrying a longbow suddenly leaped out from the top of a mountain several tens of miles away that looked like a pen stand. Behind the general's armor was a pair of wings made of metal blades. The wings were fluttering in the wind, looking as light as a pair of wings. A cold laugh rang out, and a vertical eye suddenly opened up on the general's forehead. In an instant, a hazy golden light shone and illuminated the area 100 miles in circumference. Under the illumination of this vertical eye, Wu Qi, who was fleeing with Catfish Flood Dragon 1,000 feet underground, could be seen clearly. At the moment, Wu Qi was about to enter the Lake of Four Waters with Catfish Flood Dragon. Once they entered the lake, they would be Catfish Flood Dragon's territory, and the difficulty for Yingzheng and his men to capture her would be at least 100 times higher than before. Li Xian, the general of Daqin, who was standing on the peak of the mountain, grabbed out 3 black arrows with the arrowheads shaped like wolf heads, and their shafts densely covered with countless fine patterns. He quickly pulled the bowstring, knocked the arrows, and aimed straight at Wu Qi, who was fleeing at top speed underground. 3 shrill wolf howls rang out abruptly, as 3 black beams of light, each 1,000 feet long, shot out at top speed, transforming into 3 greedy wolf heads with their mouths wide open, thrusting straight towards Wu Qi. The huge flame produced by the explosion of talismans and talisman treasures was pierced through by the black beams, and in just a blink of an eye, they caught up with Wu Qi and drilled straight into the ground. The vertical eye on Li Xian's forehead lit up, and in the next moment, Wu Qi felt a chill run down his spine, as a threat of death rose out of nowhere. Without hesitation, he brought Catfish Flood Dragon and plunged into the ground. Just when they were 3,000 feet underground, the arrows shot out by Li Xian had already pierced through the ground and arrived behind Wu Qi in a blink of an eye. The arrows came with a frigid air, as well as a tremendous aura, which made Wu Qi's body tense up, and made all the pores on his skin stand on end. Li Xian's archery had reached the acme of perfection. Instinctively, Wu Qi felt that no matter what methods he used to evade, there was no way he could avoid these 3 arrows. Also, no matter what method Li Xian used to discover Wu Qi's whereabouts, at least he could see Wu Qi's figure, and Wu Qi was not willing to use the silver lotus to save his own life, as it was an extraordinary treasure that could easily attract the attention of others. He had already offended Daqin, and if he were to show off a few more innate grade spirit items, he would be courting death. At that point of time, not only the people of Daqin, but also those from Great Yan Dynasty would have their eyes on him when the news spread out. That would truly make him an enemy of the entire world, and he would not be able to live a peaceful life anymore. Laughing bitterly, Wu Qi shouted at Catfish Flood Dragon, "Show your true form, if you want to live." Catfish Flood Dragon was very obedient at this moment. Although she did not know why she had to show her true form, she twisted her body and transformed back to her original form of a catfish, which measured over 3,000 feet long. Boom! 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 3 loud booms echoed out as Li Xian's arrows hit her body and exploded, leaving 3 large holes on her body, each about 10 feet in diameter. If Wu Qi were to receive this kind of injury, he would be dead by now. But, when it was inflicted on Catfish Flood Dragon, it only made her howl in pain. She quickly transformed back to her human form, then turned to Wu Qi and cursed, "You bastard! How dare you ask me to be your shield? Is this how you save people?" Knowing that he was in the wrong, Wu Qi carried Catfish Flood Dragon and kept running away without saying a word. On the ground, Ying Zheng and the others, who saw Wu Qi's behavior with various mystic techniques, cursed together, "Shameless." Only Li Si nodded his head, then murmured under his breath, "This young man has a good temperament, and I like him very much. If not for him attacking His Majesty, perhaps he could inherit Li Si's mantle. Tsk, he is treacherous, cruel, and merciless. Even Su Fu has suffered a great loss from him. This young man is interesting, very interesting." Standing on the peak of the mountain with his hands clasped behind his back, Li Si looked at Wu Qi, who was fleeing at top speed underground. Surprisingly, he felt a great sense of admiration. Seeing that all 3 arrows had missed their target, Li Xian's face turned extremely unsightly. Abruptly, he pulled out a heavy arrow with an arrowhead shaped like a black tortoise, the shaft as thick as an adult's arm, but only 3 feet long. He knocked it on the bowstring and was about to shoot it at Wu Qi. Right at this critical juncture, right in front of Wu Qi, right next to the edge of the Lake of Four Waters, a general clad in a golden armor with a resolute face suddenly leaped out of the lake, leading hundreds of elite soldiers, and stopped at the point where the lake and the shore met. The general was holding a bronze mirror with a diameter of 1 foot and 2 inches in his left hand, emitting a hazy green light that shone several thousand feet deep into the ground, covering Wu Qi's body. In his left hand was a strange coiling dragon spear with a crimson gold shape, and he cried out sternly, "Why don't you surrender now? With Daqin and Wang Jian here, you will not be able to act so arrogantly." On the other 2 mountaintops, on the left and right of Wu Qi, 2 more generals dashed out. "Daqin and Wang Ben are here," cried one of the black-armored generals at the top of his voice. "Daqin and Wang Li are here." Another black-armored general cried out coldly, "I swear I will kill this thief." Wang Jian, Wang Ben, and Wang Li, the 3 generals from the Wang clan of Qin, one of the 7 warlords of the Warring States period, were all here. Their grandfather, father, and grandson were holding a bronze mirror that looked exactly the same, emitting 3 bright lights of green, white, and blue, which locked tightly onto Wu Qi's body. Abruptly, Wu Qi's traveling speed became a few times slower, as a force that was stronger and tenacious than the magnetic force had tightly bound him, making it hard for him to even move his fingers. Then, Ying Zheng's joyful laughter was heard coming from afar. "My dear ministers, don't slack off. Capture this little thief. I'd like to see how bold he is to go against me, Daqin. And that catfish flood dragon, don't take her life." All the generals and generals of Qin army gave their assent, while Bai Qi and Li Xian rushed up with their weapons in their hands, surrounding Wu Qi from all directions. Su Fu and Li Si had also arrived with many practitioners, casting all sorts of restrictive spells like raindrops, turning the ground around Wu Qi as hard as diamond. Meanwhile, Li Si had written 108 mountain characters in a row, unleashing an enormous earth element energy that pressed down on Wu Qi, making him unable to move even a finger. Ying Zheng laughed even more joyfully, then said loudly, "I knew you, little thief, would definitely follow behind me and ruin my plan. Well, this is killing 2 birds with 1 stone. That catfish flood dragon can help me cultivate my divine ability, and as for you, little thief, I just happen to need your testimony." Ha, ha, ha. Ying Zheng let out a loud and joyful laughter. Served by a few practitioners, he changed into a set of clean and tidy emperor robe, then rode on a cloud and rushed over to where Wu Qi was. 3,000 feet underground, Wu Qi looked at the catfish flood dragon, whose body was cramping with pain, and said with a wry smile, "I still have a way to escape, but it will cost me a lot of my blood essence. If you promise to give me 30% of your prime dragon blood essence to temper my corporeal body, I'll save you." The catfish flood dragon clenched her jaws tightly and cried out, "If you can save me, 30% of my blood essence will be yours. If that's not enough, I can also teach you the body tempering technique of Flood Dragon Clan which Wanying Dragon King taught me." Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat. This catfish flood dragon was too kind and honest. Not only did she give him 30% of her primordial dragon blood essence, she even gave him the body tempering technique. What Wu Qi lacked now was a powerful divine ability to temper his corporeal body, and to fight with his corporeal body. The body tempering technique of Flood Dragon Clan should be pretty good, right? But, if a living human cultivator were to cultivate it, would he be able to produce some strange things? But, he did not care too much. Seeing that Ying Zheng was about to arrive on a cloud, Wu Qi hastily began to burn his blood essence. The blood-burning escape art of Scroll of Stealing was activated, and in an instant, 90% of Wu Qi's blood turned into nothingness. His body was emptied, and his vision darkened, nearly passing out. The enormous energy transformed from his blood essence was rocking and rocking rapidly in his meridians. Clenching his jaws tightly, Wu Qi recited a few incantations, then quickly performed incantation gestures with both hands and thrust them out. A blood-red light flashed around him, as Wu Qi brought the catfish flood dragon and abruptly pierced through the strange light unleashed by the mirrors. Like a stream of light, they went through the restrictive spell jointly deployed by Su Fu and Li Si, and plunged into the Lake of 4 Waters in a flash. Guided by the catfish flood dragon, both men flew at top speed for over 2,000 miles, and plunged into a hidden underwater mansion in the center of the lake. Chapter 174. The Lake of 4 Waters was the place where 4 rivers converged. The surface of the lake was filled with turbulent waves, and it was extremely dangerous. However, the area below 1,000 feet from the surface of the lake was calm and peaceful. Apart from some rapid undercurrents that flowed along a fixed path, the rest of the lake was filled with beautiful sceneries, as if it was a paradise. The Catfish Flood Dragon's cave was located in an abyss slightly to the south of the center of the Lake of 4 Waters. The depth of the water here was over 30 miles, and at the bottom of the lake was a large number of strange rocks that looked like jade and were shaped like corals. These strange rocks were scattered all over the area of 100 miles in circumference. Amidst these rocks, there was a tens of miles long and about 1 mile wide abyss that plunged 100 miles deep. The Catfish Flood Dragon's cave was located in a water cave at the bottom of the abyss. The main entrance of the cave was not very spacious, as it was artificially built into an arched door that looked like a city gate. A plaque made from 10,000 years old waterine wood was hung on top of it, on which 3 characters were written, Catfish King's Cave, in a handwriting that looked like the scratching of a chicken's claw. On the rock walls on both sides of the arched door were several thousand pearls of different sizes, emitting bright lights of different colors, such as green, white, red, and blue, illuminating the abyss as if it was daytime. Inside the cave was a huge cave, measuring about 10 miles in circumference. Right in the middle of the cave was a large stone bed. Presumably, it was the place where the demon catfish usually meditated and cultivated herself. There were countless small holes on the walls of the cave, and some aquatic demon beasts could be seen moving in and out of them. Right when Wu Qi brought the Catfish Flood Dragon into the cave, he immediately fell to the ground. In an instant, 90% of his blood essence was burned into magical energy, and he exercised a mystic technique to flee 1,000 miles away. If it were an ordinary man who had lost 90% of his blood, he would have died long ago. Fortunately, Wu Qi had a mystic technique that kept him alive. But, he had also exhausted all his energy essence, and his body was as empty as a broken sack, without any strength left. The Catfish Flood Dragon also fell to the ground when she entered the cave. She sprung to her feet, waved her hands and cried out, "Boys, close the door and activate all the formations. There are villains who want to capture me. Quick, activate all the defensive mechanisms. Io, send a letter to the old Dragon King and ask him to come and save us." Amidst Catfish Flood Dragon's loud roar, a group of strange-looking little demons, such as crabs, shrimps, carps, loaches, and many others, came leaping out of the cave, hastily closing the 3 feet thick main door, which was forged with purine water silver, and placed 3 metal bolts on it, each as thick as a human head. Soon after, these little demons scrambled around in a flurry, waving some formation flags and the like. Suddenly, the underwater mansion trembled, and a protective formation had been faintly activated. Wu Qi took a deep breath, pulled out 2 bottles of pills that could quickly replenish his energy and breath, and shoved them into his mouth. After that, he grabbed the Catfish Flood Dragon, who was waving her arms and legs wildly, and said, 30% of your blood essence, quick, then all your treasures, quick, quick. I can't afford to provoke that group of people outside. I'll leave after taking what I deserve. Just now, when those little demons activated the protective formation, Wu Qi gave a glance at the formation flags and magical items placed on the platform placed right in the middle of the cave. It was a 3 dragons water-sucking formation, which communicated with the water veins and gathered the earth energies. The formation communicated with the energies from the 3 tributaries of the Lake of 4 Waters, transforming into an immeasurable water element guarding formation. Once the formation was fully activated, the enormous water element energies from the 3 tributaries could transform into 3 water dragons to attack the enemy. But, after all, it was a pure water element formation, and it lacked some variations of the interaction and restraint between the 5 elements. On top of that, the person who constructed the formation had a rough understanding of the Tao of formations, and the formation flags and other magical items used to control the formation were not worth looking at. At most, they could only unleash less than 30% of the total power of the 3 tributaries. With such little power, how could they withstand the siege of Yingzheng and his men? Just now, Wu Qi was nearly killed by Yingzheng's generals, and he had personally experienced the formidable cultivation base of Daqin and the other captains, as well as the strange treasures they possessed. Not to mention anything else, just the large bao owned by Li Xian and the 3 mirrors owned by Wang Jian and his family members were almost as powerful as upper-grade magical treasures. Even Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, which claimed to be the strongest among all 13 immortal Dao sects of Great Yan Dynasty, only possessed 5 flying swords of lower-grade magical treasures. Of course, Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect also had a dustless lamp, which could be classified as an innate spirit treasure. However, as it was stolen by Wu Qi, it was not included in the list. All in all, no matter it was the cultivation base or magical treasures of the people from Daqin dynasty, they were all incredibly powerful. So, how could this crude underwater mansion stop them, who were as ferocious as wolves and tigers? Once the three dragons' water-sucking formation was breached, Wuqi had no interest in dying together with this catfish flood dragon. Although the catfish flood dragon was a demon beast, and had an innate ferociousness in her bones, she did have a simple and honest character. Upon hearing Wuqi's request, she quickly ran to the side of her stone bed, pulled out several dozens of magical items, each glinting with various colors, from a secret compartment at the head of the bed. Without any hesitation, she told Wuqi, "Apart from my flood dragon core, all the other treasures are here. I'll give you 30% of my blood essence now." Then, she casually drew a line on her fingertip. Her body trembled, and a stream of golden blood shot out from it. Wuqi reached out his hand and grabbed the golden blood, refining it and fusing it into his body. An enormous energy essence burst out from his body like an explosion, quickly fusing with all the cells in Wuqi's body. Creaking noises were heard coming from Wuqi's body, as the strength of his fleshly body skyrocketed once again. His spirit, energy, and vitality were soaring at an incredible speed, and in just a blink of an eye, they were at least a few times stronger. As the catfish flood dragon had a huge body, 30% of her blood essence was nearly equal to the total blood essence of several hundred ordinary cultivators. Furthermore, as her cultivation base was equivalent to that of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm, the energy essence in her blood essence was even greater and purer. After barely absorbing a little bit of the blood essence, Wuqi's fleshly body could no longer endure it. Hastily, he kept the remaining enormous amount of blood essence into his body, placing it in the stamen of the silver lotus and nourishing it with the innate energies of 5 elements. After that, he took a deep breath and rose to his feet, his body brimming with energy. The blood essence he consumed just now had been completely replenished, and he even obtained a great amount of it. Currently, Wuqi was brimming with energy, as if he had the strength to lift up a mountain. After putting all the treasures brought to him by the catfish flood dragon into his storage ring, Wuqi did not have the time to identify the origin of these dazzling objects. He cupped his fist and said, "All right, the deal is done. Wuqi will take his leave now. Fellow Taoist, you better be careful. I'm afraid those people won't let you go until they capture you alive." The catfish flood dragon kept nodding her big catfish head and said in a low, muffled voice, "If they want to take my life, they will have to see if they have the ability to do so." Those useless fools must have already sent the news to old Dragon King when they returned. Also, I've asked my children to send out a message asking for help just now. I'm sure old Dragon King will be here soon. Old Dragon King. Whinnying Dragon King. During the fight between Ingzheng and the catfish flood dragon, Wuqi had heard this name before. He was the one who wounded Ingzheng, and killed several tens of thousands of elite soldiers of Ingzheng. He was a demon dragon who was very close to becoming a heaven immortal. Once he became a heaven immortal, he would have the body of a true dragon, and his overall strength would be at least 100 times stronger than now. Wuqi wondered what kind of good things this giant of the demon clan had. However, Wuqi knew very well that although he could deal with Ingzheng and his men, compared to this giant demon dragon who had lived for countless years, he was still too young and naive. Unless he could cultivate his nascent soul, no matter how good his divine abilities and cultivation techniques were, they would be useless in the face of an absolute overall strength. If he wanted to fish out some benefits from this old dragon, he would have to wait until his cultivation base became stronger. As Wuqi was about to bid farewell to the catfish flood dragon and leave, a tricolored beam of green, white, and blue suddenly came falling down from the sky. The cave abode was instantly locked down by the tricolored beam. Dozens of shrill wolf howls could be heard coming from the cave abode, while one sharp arrow force after another fell down at a high speed, causing the cave abode to shake violently. The thick and heavy water outside the cave abode was stirred up by huge waves, while dozens of formation flags and magical items on the platform in the cave abode were knocked down. "Oh no!" cried the catfish flood dragon, hastily leaped onto the platform, waving her arms and legs while holding a few formation flags to control the formation to defend against the enemy. However, it seemed this catfish flood dragon was not very proficient in the Tao of formations, as she placed a few formation flags in the wrong positions, and used the wrong hand gestures to control the formation. Initially, the formation could defend against the enemy automatically, but after being disturbed by her, its power became weaker and weaker. In just a blink of an eye, more than half of the water element energy gathered by the formation was destroyed. The sound of water splashing was heard coming from outside the cave abode, followed by Ng Zheng's voice, "Evil creature, and that little thief, I won't let you go this time." A stream of water lit up on the platform, showing the scene outside the cave abode. Leading a large group of men, Ng Zheng had lined up into a formation above the cave abode. Li Si was seen writing quickly with a writing brush in the eye of the formation, writing one character after another, mountain. As the last stroke was drawn, Li Si casually flicked his finger, and the numerous characters on the scroll shot out whistling, wheeling, and wheeling above his head. Suddenly, the ground at the bottom of the lake began to tremble, as a huge amount of earth element energy rolled and rushed towards those characters. A lofty mountain, standing a few miles tall and having a base of nearly 1 mile in circumference, suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Panting heavily, Li Si pointed his finger at the lofty mountain, then forcefully pointed his finger at the Catfish King's mansion. The lofty mountain fell down from the sky with a whistling noise, smashing viciously onto the nearly 1 mile thick dark water layer above the Catfish King's mansion. 99% of the water element energy gathered by the three dragons' water-sucking formation was shattered by the lofty mountain. Countless waves of water rolled and rolled in all directions, leaving only a thin layer of water vapor that barely protected the cave abode. The tremendous pressure from the lofty mountain caused the cliffs surrounding the cave abode to crumble, while the violent impact shattered the broken rocks into countless tiny particles of sand and sand. With just one strike, the terrain within 100 miles around the Catfish King's mansion had changed its shape. "I'm finished. I'm going to die." The Catfish Flood Dragon cried out in exasperation. The formation flags in her hand, as well as the magical items on the platform, all exploded into pieces. The Catfish Flood Dragon was caught unprepared, and was blown away from the platform by one of the exploding formation flags. She rolled and rolled before Wu Qi, her body covered in dark smoke. While Wu Qi was hesitating whether he should help the Catfish Flood Dragon, or simply run away as soon as possible, a golden flood dragon, with the diameter of a water bucket and several tens of feet long, dashed out from the hole in the deepest part of the cave. Following behind the golden flood dragon were dozens of strange and bizarre demon beasts of the flood dragon family. Some of them looked like big fishes, some looked like giant pythons, and some looked like pangolins. However, all of them had dragon horns on their heads, 4 claws on their abdomens, and golden or silver dragon whiskers growing from the corners of their mouths. When she saw the golden flood dragon, who was enshrouded in a faint layer of watery clouds, the Catfish Flood Dragon cried out joyfully, "Whinnying Dragon King, help me." Pointing her finger at Wu Qi, she cried out, "This little brother is a good man, and he has saved my life. Those people outside are all villains, and they want to capture me to cultivate some 9 dragons cauldron grand magic." The golden flood dragon twisted its body and transformed into an old man with white hair and a ferocious face. Clad in a golden robe, Whinnying Dragon King gave Wu Qi a ferocious look, then laughed evilly and said, "9 dragons cauldron grand magic? Hee, this name sounds so familiar." Clicking his tongue, Whinnying Dragon King said with a gloomy voice, "My boys, hide yourselves. When they come in, we'll catch them off guard." The dozens of strange and bizarre flood dragons transformed back into their human forms, standing guard around the cauldron. From the hole they came out from just now, many strange and bizarre aquatic demons kept leaping out. In just a blink of an eye, the entire cauldron was filled with countless aquatic demons. Wu Qi smiled, a very happy smile. Chapter 175. Tens of thousands of demons had gathered together, and all of them had formed their demon cores, having a cultivation base equal to peak Jin Dan realm or above. All the demon beasts had transformed into their human forms, preparing their most brutal and vicious innate abilities, preparing to deliver a deadly strike to the invading cultivators. Some demon beasts even found some magical treasures by chance, or crafted some magical treasures using their horns, teeth, scales, and some other things that fell off from their human forms. All of them were ready. Some of the demon beasts threw hostile glances at Wu Qi. After all, it was too eye-catching for a living human being to appear amidst several tens of thousands of demon beasts. However, after he heard that Wu Qi had saved Catfish Flood Dragon's life, Wanying Dragon King immediately stood beside Wu Qi. As the king of all aquatic demon beasts in Longyuan River, none of the demon beasts present dared to challenge his dignity. Although some demon beasts wished to open their mouths and swallow Wu Qi, when they saw Wanying Dragon King talking and laughing with Wu Qi, they obediently gave up on the idea. Currently, Wu Qi was talking to Wanying Dragon King with utmost caution. This old demon dragon had lived in Longyuan River for at least several tens of thousands of years. He was a cunning man, and his scales were emitting a strong smell of oil. He was the kind of person who was extremely slippery. While the old demon dragon was talking and laughing with Wu Qi, he kept trying to find out about Wu Qi's background, and all sorts of questions related to Wu Qi. Wu Qi dared not to tell this old demon dragon about his background. Instead, he kept making up stories, and at the same time, kept trying to find out more information from the old demon dragon. For example, he wanted to know the exact situation of Longyuan River's water system, the details of Meng Mountains where it flowed through, the old demon dragon's background, and why the demon beasts of Longyuan River, who were so powerful, did not come out from the mountains. Both of them talked and laughed merrily for the time it took to finish a pot of tea. After that, they exchanged a glance and gave each other a knowing smile, looking at each other and nodding their heads. Neither of them said anything useful. They were just babbling nonsense, but they made it sound as if they were telling the truth. Wu Qi looked at the old devil dragon and his back was drenched in cold sweat. This old devil dragon wasn't easy to deal with. There were a few times when Wu Qi almost couldn't block his questions. Old demon dragon looked at Wu Qi and nodded his head repeatedly. Talent, this kid is a talent. His subordinates, who are as stupid as rocks, are completely incomparable to Wu Qi. It was a pity that he was a human. If he was a demon, the old demon dragon would definitely keep him in Longyuan River and let him take over his throne in the future. Wanying Dragon King felt that he was about to attain the realm of heaven immortal. In the future, once he got rid of the body of demon dragon and transformed into the body of a true dragon, he would immediately leave Longyuan River and ascend to the place where he was supposed to go. However, among the countless demonic beasts in Longyuan River, there wasn't a single successor that caught his eye. Wu Qi was clever and cunning, but unfortunately, he was a human. Wanying Dragon King breathed out a sigh, looked at Wu Qi, grinned and said, "Not bad, little kid. Well, I've talked a lot of nonsense. Putting aside everything else, you should at least tell me your name, right? TSK, don't tell me I'm going to keep calling you little kid or kid. You've saved the Catfish Flood Dragon's life, so you're our honorable guest. Don't worry, I won't eat you in one bite." Wu pondered for a while, then he laughed and said, "My name is Wu Qi. Wu means don't do to others what you don't want others to do to you, and Qi means beg the heaven and earth for my life. The meaning of my name is that I will never lower my head and beg anyone." Wu Qi laughed dryly in his mind. His real name was Wu Qi, and Wu Qi was the name he gave himself after he was forced to join the anti-government Boy Scout troop. Even if Wanying Dragon King or those demon beasts around him had some kind of vicious curse technique, they could not do anything to him, Wu Qi. In the world of cultivators, the real name could not be easily revealed to anyone. Wu Qi, Wu Qi. The old demon dragon nodded his head and said, "Not a bad name, and the meaning is excellent as well. Don't do to others what you don't want others to do to you." TSK, sounds interesting. He casually pulled out a medallion made from dragon bones and threw it over to Wu Qi, smiled and said, "From now on, you're the honorable guest of all the demon beasts in Longyuan River. With this medallion, no demon beasts within 10,000 miles of both banks of Longyuan River will treat you as an honorable guest." The medallion was very heavy, as it was carved from the bones of a demon dragon. It was about the size of a palm, and on the front side of the medallion was a map, which should be the detailed layout of Longyuan River. On the back side was a picture of a dragon soaring in the wind, and 2 characters of Wanying were inlaid with tiny black pearls. There was also a thread of Wanying Dragon King's dragon aura in the medallion, which proved that it was an authentic one, and not an imitation. After receiving the medallion and thanking Wanying Dragon King, Wuqi kept the medallion and did not put it in his heart. On the other hand, Wanying Dragon King was laughing in his mind. Since Wuqi had accepted the bone medallion of Longyuan River as an honorable guest, he had established a friendship with Longyuan River. In the future, if something bad happened to the aquatic demon beasts in Longyuan River, Wuqi would surely lend a helping hand. With a medallion, he had established a friendship with Wuqi, and this old demon dragon had truly profited. While both men were having different thoughts, the stone wall above Catfish King's mansion suddenly shattered, and a tricolored ray pierced through the hole. However, upon Wanying Dragon King's arrival, he immediately unleashed his dragon core, unleashing a vast amount of water waves that covered the entire cave. When the tricolored ray shone down, they could only see the endless rolling water waves, and could not see the existence of tens of thousands of demon beasts underneath. As a demon dragon that was nearly a heaven immortal, Wanying Dragon King's divine ability and magical power were far stronger than Wang Jian, Wang Ben, and Wang Li. Although the mirrors in their hands were upper-grade magical treasures with incredible power, Wanying Dragon King's dragon core had been tempered by him for several tens of thousands of years, and its quality was close to that of an immortal item. Thus, how could these 3 mirrors be able to deal with it? The tricolored ray flickered and swirled, splashing and splashing onto the surface of the dark water waves, producing a magnificent 7-colored glow. Yingzheng and his company slowly descended from the watery cloud, hovering above the water waves and looking down at the cave which had its cover uncovered. With both hands clasped behind his back, Yingzheng was looking down at the cave in a domineering manner. Meanwhile, Su Fu was acting as his mouthpiece, grinning coldly and saying, "That catfish flood dragon, and that little guy, why don't you come out and accept your death?" Su Fu's facial muscles twitched. He hated Wuqi to the core. His dharma eye was nearly blinded by Wuqi, and 70% of his soul essence was consumed by Wuqi as well. All his cultivation base was nearly gone. If not for the spirit herbs secretly kept in Yingzheng's inner palace, he would have long become a cripple. This was a deep and serious hatred. Su Fu swore in his mind that once he captured Wuqi alive, he would put him into the cauldron and concoct him into a human core pill. Otherwise, how could he vent his hatred? Su Fu gave a loud cry and raised both of his arms up high. A large sheet of green flame flowed out from his palms, forming into 2 dark green ribbons around him. Su Fu's shriveled lips were wriggling as he recited some strange and abstruse incantation. Abruptly, the green flame exploded and wheeled around him, forming into a huge rune that looked like the character of thunder found in the ancient seal script. The rune was written in an ancient style, and when it was fully formed, wisps of thunderbolts kept bursting out from it, circling around it for a few times before fusing back into the rune. Accompanied by a deep and strange incantation, Su Fu held the rune with both hands and slowly waved them down. Abruptly, the rune transformed into a few hundred tiny thunderbolts, plunging down at top speed amidst a series of rapid popping noises. Wanying Dragon King let out a loud laugh. He opened his mouth and sucked the dragon core back into his body. The water waves that blotted the sky disappeared in an instant. He laughed aloud and said, "That little kid named Yingzheng, you haven't mastered your 9 dragons cauldron grand magic? My boys, kill them all." He casually pointed his finger out. A stream of dark water soared up into the sky, transforming into a huge hand and greeted the thunderbolts that plunged down from the sky. The thunderbolts, which had a power equal to the full force strike of an early-stage nascent soul earth immortal, were easily grabbed and crushed into pieces by the hand. Amidst the wild laughter of the old demon dragon, the several tens of thousands of aquatic demons, Chi-Chi, unleashed all the innate divine abilities and various magical treasures that they had long prepared. Immediately, colorful poisonous fog and poisonous water soared up into the sky, transforming into a mass of poisonous gas that measured 100 miles in circumference and several tens of miles in thickness, wrapping around Ing Zheng and his company tightly. Countless magical treasures forged from tusks, horns, and scales flew up into the air and shot into the poisonous gas like raindrops. On the spot, several hundred Jin Dan grade Daqin soldiers had their bodies pierced through, while blood sprayed out from their mouths and drifted into the water like sieves. They were at the bottom of the lake, several tens of miles below the surface of the water. As such, the surrounding water element energy was extremely abundant, allowing the magical powers and divine abilities of several tens of thousands of aquatic demons to be brought into full play. Apart from Ing Zheng, the magical powers and divine abilities of the others were greatly restricted in this place. Several tens of thousands of aquatic demons had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers. With a series of surprise attacks, the Daqin soldiers were in a very difficult situation. In just a blink of an eye, they had lost 70% of their men. Ing Zheng let out a shrill cry, "Weiniying Demon Dragon, it's you again." Weiniying Dragon King laughed joyfully and said, "Little Ing Zheng, I'm your grandpa dragon. Ha ha ha, last time, you had to use several tens of thousands of soldiers to cover the rear, and only then did you manage to escape. This time, you only have a few men with you, and I've brought all my boys from several tens of thousands of miles around here. If you can still escape, I'll spare your life the next time. What do you think? Run away, run away, run away." While roaring wildly, Weiniying Dragon King brought several tens of thousands of aquatic demons and soared into the sky, surrounding Ing Zheng and his company tightly. A white light flashed, as Baiqi leaped towards the old demon dragon with a sword in his hand. But suddenly, a shadow of a dragon tail flashed behind the old demon dragon's back, sweeping across and hitting Baiqi head-on. He coughed out a mouthful of blood and was forced to retreat. Baiqi's cultivation base was very close to the mastery stage of nascent soul realm, but the old demon dragon was a mastery stage nascent divinity cultivator. As long as he could transcend the heavenly tribulation, he would become a heaven immortal. The gap between their cultivation base was one major realm, and it was a gap that could never be made up for. With just one strike, Baiqi was forced to retreat. Ing Zheng cried out at the top of his voice, "Retreat! Retreat! Retreat!" The shadows of 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent soared into the sky from behind Ing Zheng's back, quickly forming into a fist-sized seal. Ing Zheng opened his mouth and coughed out a mouthful of blood, then cried out fiercely, "Old demon dragon, I swear I'll wipe out your entire clan." After that, he spat out 9 mouthfuls of blood essence onto the seal, then cried out, "9 dragons cauldron grand magic, turning the sea into mulberry fields, 10,000 miles teleportation." The black seal exploded abruptly, while streams of blood burst out from Ing Zheng's 7 apertures at the same time. A black light enveloped Ing Zheng, as well as Li Si, Su Fu, Baiqi, and all the important ministers standing beside him. Their bodies gradually turned blurry, then slowly disappeared from where they stood. Weiniying Dragon King flew into a great rage. "Are you trying to escape this time?" he roared. Abruptly, he transformed into a flood dragon that measured over 3,000 feet long, waving his claws and grabbing towards Ing Zheng, who was shrouded in the black light. However, when his claws touched the black light, the bodies of Ing Zheng and his company were like phantoms, and they did not suffer any harm. Wu Qi followed closely behind the old demon dragon and quickly approached Ing Zheng. Then, he performed the seal of minor universal star shifting with his right hand, and used the picking star's palm with his left hand to gently touch Ing Zheng's left hand with his picking star's palm. With that, he removed the black dragon ring worn on the ring finger of Ing Zheng's left hand. When the ring fell into his hand, Wu Qi immediately hid it under his sleeve. After that, he roared and yelled as he wielded the sword of greedy wolf and charged towards those soldiers and practitioners who were left behind by Ing Zheng. The sword beam flashed, and a dozen heads flew up into the sky. Chapter 176. This bunch of rascals. Waiting Dragon King stared at the spot where Zheng and his men disappeared with a gloomy expression, then casually crushed a few peak stage Jin Dan Qin soldiers into pieces. The surrounding demon beasts swarmed up and attacked, slaughtering all the Qin soldiers and practitioners hovering above the Catfish King mansion. The sky was filled with Jin Dan, which were forcibly pulled out by the demon beasts. The demon beasts were laughing and playing with these Jin Dan, their eyes narrowed into two lines. For demon beasts, the Jin Dan of human cultivators was the best tonic. A single Jin Dan could save these demon beasts several hundred years of hard cultivation. Zheng had brought over 1,000 Jin Dan soldiers and practitioners to provoke them, which was equal to giving a generous gift to the aquatic demons of Longyuan River. Wu Qi was beaming with joy as well. Just now, when these demon beasts were busy killing the demon beasts, and when Jin Dan was flying all over the sky, Wu Qi had used a unique trick to stealthily fish out nearly 100 Jin Dan pills, which had a cultivation base of at least middle stage Jin Dan. Together with the Jin Dan from the few talisman masters from Heavenly Spirit sect, his false core would be greatly improved, and his cultivation base would improve to a higher level. What a pity! Wu Qi shook his head helplessly as he looked at the glinting Jin Dan in the hands of those demon beasts with greedy eyes. He could not ask these demon beasts to spit out the food that had entered their mouths. These demon beasts were greedy by nature, and they were even greedier than Wu Qi himself. Shaking his head, Wu Qi cupped his fist at Waiting Dragon King and said, "Old Dragon King, are you really going to let Zheng and his men go? How can you allow someone to sleep beside your bed? If Zheng and his men are not killed, your Longyuan River will never be peaceful." The dragon beard on Waiting Dragon King's lips trembled as he said angrily, "Of course I have to kill them. But, this group of juniors are running away at a frightening speed. Last time, when I revealed my true form and wounded Zheng, he had to use several tens of thousands of soldiers to detonate themselves and tie me down, allowing them to escape. This time, they escaped in such a strange way. Where can we find them?" Wu Qi smiled, a very happy smile. He hurriedly said, "The old Dragon King doesn't know where they are hiding, but I do. I've been going in and out of their camp dozens of times in the past few days. If I rush over now, I should be able to catch up to them and prevent them from escaping." Waiting Dragon King raised his brows, and immediately let out a long and drawn-out dragon cry. Following his dragon roar, the Longyuan River, which stretched for an unknown distance, began to boil. Not only the main water vein of Longyuan River, countless demon beasts of various sizes, including those of nascent soul realm, Jin Dan realm, and even Xiantian realm of human cultivators, began to gather in Catfish Flood Dragon's mansion through the Dragon Essence Water Channel, formed innately in the Longyuan River. The Dragon Essence Waterway was similar to the teleportation array set up by human cultivators. It could allow demon beasts to quickly move from one region of water to another. The waterway did not consume energy stones, but the water element energy that was stored in the waterway. When the water element energy stored in the hundreds of thousands of Dragon Essence water channels in Longyuan River was completely depleted, several million demon beasts of various sizes had arrived at this place. Among these several million aquatic demon beasts, 3 of them were nascent soul and divine transformation realm great demons. They were a giant turtle, a giant crab, and a giant starfish. Once again, Wu Qi was puzzled. Why would a starfish, a creature that lived in the deep ocean, appear in Longyuan River? All 3 of them had the cultivation base of divine transformation realm not too long ago. Although their nascent divinity had not stabilized yet, and could not leave their bodies to travel, their magical power and divine abilities were very frightening. Each of them could easily fight 3 to 5 peak stage nascent soul cultivators head-on. Apart from the 3 nascent soul and divine transformation realm great demons, there were nearly 1,000 aquatic demons whose cultivation base was equivalent to human nascent soul cultivators, and more than 50,000 Jin Dan realm aquatic demons. All the rest of the aquatic demons had the cultivation base of Xiantian realm. Although their magical power and divine abilities were not very strong, relying on their enormous bodies and innate talent, they still possessed a combat strength that was much stronger than human cultivators of the same realm. Wu Qi's body was shivering when he saw the scene. He could not believe that the Longyuan River, this ridiculously huge river, had actually nurtured so many aquatic demon beasts. Perhaps it was because the water element energy stored in the Dragon Essence water channel had been depleted, as more demons had yet to arrive. Only heaven knew what the scene would be like when Wanying Dragon King summoned all the demons in the entire Longyuan River. However, the demons that were summoned now possessed a power that could destroy the heaven and earth. All these demon beasts were aquatic demons. Once they moved, they would be filled with water vapor and dark clouds. Millions of demon beasts had gathered in the sky above the Lake of Four Waters. The area several thousand miles in circumference was filled with dark clouds that blotted out the sky and blotted out the sun. Thunderbolts and lightning flashed crazily amidst the dark clouds, and a heavy downpour came whistling down. A vast expanse of white water curtain swept across the mountain ridges several thousand miles in circumference. Those towering trees, which stood 1,000 feet tall and required several dozens of men to wrap their arms around them, were bent over by the sudden storm. The giant hailstones brought along by the storm even broke the branches of these trees, and countless unlucky birds and beasts were smashed into meat paste by the heavy rain. The storm had even triggered mountain torrents. Yellow, muddy water poured out from various valleys and killed countless living beings. The water level of this section of Longyuan River had risen to a height of 1,000 feet. Many hills were submerged by the water, and only a small hill was left floating above the water's surface, struggling to survive. Looking at the mighty aura of these aquatic demon beasts, Wu Qi felt his scalp going numb. Fortunately, these demon beasts were aquatic demons, and had no interest in walking on the shore. Otherwise, if one day they were not in a good mood, they might bring an army of thousands of men and horses to Great Yan Dynasty for a stroll. That would be a great disaster. Amidst the rumbling of thunder and flashes of lightning, Wanying Dragon King flew above the demon beasts and roared furiously. Since the ancient times, we, the people of Longyuan River, have always guarded our territory, and never made enemies with anyone. A few months ago, there was a greedy junior who tried to capture me alive so that he could practice his cultivation. Today, it is the same daring junior who tried to capture and kill the master of Lake of Four Waters. See you. There is a saying among the humans, if this can be tolerated, what can't be tolerated? Today, we must flatten this group of human cultivators. The giant crab, giant turtle, and giant starfish, who had the strongest cultivation base, had revealed their true forms. Each of them was a giant demon with the circumference of several thousand feet. They were breathing demonic clouds and water vapor out of their mouths while roaring with a monstrous aura. When the three great demons unleashed their power, the water level rose another 1,000 feet. Following closely behind them, countless demons were roaring and roaring furiously, filling the air with a pungent smell of water. Wanying Dragon King did not waste his breath. After boosting up the morale, he rode on a cloud and rushed to the forefront. Wu Qi rode on a sword beam and led the way, while the army of several million demon beasts rushed towards the direction of Qin Army's field headquarters in a mighty manner. When the aquatic demons made their appearance, a great amount of water in Longyuan River moved along with them. Wherever the aquatic demons went, the water of Longyuan River would surge and follow them. Countless mountains and forests were submerged by the water, and a vast expanse of whiteness ruled the land. Amidst the roars and roars of numerous demon beasts, Wu Qi and his company quickly arrived before the Qin Army's field headquarters. At the moment, the moon was hanging high above the western mountains, and the dawn of dawn was slowly rising from the east. Vaguely, a few wisps of red clouds could be seen looming in the east. In the Qin Army's field headquarters located in the valley, several 100,000 soldiers were lining up in a formation amidst a shrill cry of command. Numerous practitioners were hovering midair, their bodies shrouded in dark clouds and green mists. Holding long banners of strange shapes in their hands, they were nervously deploying various runes and restrictive spells, covering the entire field with countless layers of vicious and cruel restrictive spells. Rumble. Amidst the rumbling of thunder, countless dark clouds came sweeping over from all directions, as several million aquatic demon beasts surrounded the Qin Army's field headquarters from all directions. Huge waves rolled and rocked, rushing down from the surrounding mountains, forming into a white wall of water that stood nearly 1,000 feet tall near the valley where the Qin Army's field headquarters was located. Amidst the vast and mighty ocean, apart from those demon beasts with cultivation base and magical power who were stirring up the waves, there were also countless aquatic creatures who were brought here by the river, showing their mighty bodies and showing off their mighty prowess. There were all kinds of venomous snakes, piranhas, and many other ferocious creatures swimming in the water. The dark and dense shadows of these creatures made one shudder with fear. Escorted by Wu Qi, Catfish Flood Dragon, and a few dozen other flood dragons, the giant turtle, the giant crab, and the giant starfish, Wanying Dragon King rode a cloud and came to the sky above the Qin Army's field headquarters with a ferocious look. His eyes shone with an eerie golden gleam as he looked down at the Qin Army's field headquarters. Wanying Dragon King cried out sternly, "Ingzheng, little boy, chop off your own head and let me use it as a wine vessel. The rest of you, bring me your nascent souls, Jin Dan, and whatever you have. I'll make the decision and allow you to leave a thread of your true soul for reincarnation." Wu Qi nearly burst out laughing. Why did Wanying Dragon King's words sound so similar to Bai Qitian, Li Si, and the others? Wanying Dragon King cried out in a carefree manner, "Lord Dragon King, I understand the will of the heaven. The heaven has the virtue of cherishing every living thing, so it is not appropriate to kill all of you. Leaving a thread of your true soul for you to reincarnate is a good deed that will accumulate virtue. I only need to face one last thunder tribulation before I can ascend and become an immortal. As you have committed too many sins of killing, the thunder tribulation is too heavy, so it won't destroy your souls. Now that I've given you a chance to reincarnate, why aren't you kowtowing and kneeling down to thank me for my great kindness?" Wu Qi could not help but let out a laugh. He too flattered Wanying Dragon King, and at the same time, ridiculed Ingzheng and the others. "You are absolutely right. Old Dragon King, you are the most merciful and kind man. Ingzheng, Li Si, Su Fu, and the others should kneel down and kowtow to you." Ingzheng, who had exercised a mystic technique and brought his trusted subordinates and ministers to flee, had his face pale. Together with all the senior ministers and generals, he flew up into the sky, facing Wu Qi and the others across the primordial talisman formation. Staring coldly at Wu Qi and Wanying Dragon King, Ingzheng sneered and said, "This is ridiculous. You are just a bunch of chickens and dogs, evil creatures who don't know the meaning of life and death. How dare you talk to me like this? Today, I'm going to kill all of you demons and devils at any cost." Looking at the venomous look in Ingzheng's eyes, Wu Qi quickly took a step back, smiled at Ingzheng and said, "Your Majesty, this is between you and Old Dragon King. I'm just a guide. No matter how you fight, don't blame me." Wanying Dragon King was very generous. He stretched out his hand and patted on Wu Qi's shoulder, laughed and said, "Ingzheng, Wu Qi is just a guide. His cultivation base is too low, so he can't interfere in our business. Hee, this is between you and me. Hee, today, either you die, or I live, either I live, or you die. In any case, you are dead meat." Wu Qi grinned and laughed. He did not expect this old demon dragon to be so humorous. His words made Ingzheng's body tremble violently, and he nearly coughed out a mouthful of blood. With a stern look in his eyes, Ingzheng gazed at Wu Qi, sneered and said, "What a low cultivation base. Hee. Fine. Wanying Dragon King, if you have the capability, then break into my camp and take my life." Waving his sleeve, Ingzheng brought all his ministers back to the wooden city. He stood on top of the city wall, staring coldly at the demon beasts that filled the sky. Wu Qi turned to look at Wanying Dragon King. The old demon dragon pondered for a brief moment, then raised both of his hands and cried out, "My boys, attack. Kill them all and eat them all." While Wu Qi was puzzled by the order given by Wanying Dragon King, he saw countless demon beasts swarming towards the Qin army's camp in a disorderly manner, like some hooligans fighting on the street. A loud boom rang out from the surrounding mountains, then they poured down from the lofty mountains with a frightening force, smashing forcefully onto the defensive ruins of the Qin army's camp. A bright light flashed, and suddenly, the defensive runes above the Qin army's camp flickered with a strange flame. Chapter 177. When he saw the Qin army had activated the restrictive spell, Wu Qi instinctively retreated several hundred feet back, getting ready to slip away at any time. The first thing that was activated was the outermost layer of countless black runes hovering above the Qin army's campsite. These twisting black runes appeared out of nowhere in the air, emanating a bone-piercing cold air. A frigid wind rolled up from the ground, and a great amount of black snowflakes fell from the sky. Suddenly, a black blizzard swept across an area of 100 miles in circumference, blanketing the entire valley. Wherever the bone-piercing cold wind blew past, even the mountain rocks were frozen into ice cubes, turning into crystal-clear ice crystals that scattered all over the ground. The raging waves of numerous aquatic demons slammed forcefully onto the layer of black restrictive spell. The cold wind blew across, and a frigid air shot out in all directions. The raging waves froze abruptly, transforming into a several tens of miles thick black Xianbing barrier, firmly trapping the Qin army's campsite underneath. Inside the ice barrier, hundreds of thousands of venomous snakes, piranhas, water spiders, and all sorts of venomous aquatic insects and ferocious creatures were frozen by the frigid air, losing their lives in a blink of an eye. Nearly 10,000 aquatic demon beasts who charged at the forefront were frozen as well. Apart from a few demon beasts who had formed their demon cores and struggled for a few moments, all the other demon beasts had lost their signs of life. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes. He had studied these runes in the script of ancient law before. Not only was the black cold wind bitingly cold and could hurt people, it also carried a thread of nether energy that came from the legendary Nether Palace of the Netherworld, which was used to wipe out the lives of all living beings. In the Tao of ancient runes, these black runes represented the meaning of bitter cold and quietus. A restrictive spell formed from several 100,000 of these runes had an unimaginably mighty power. Waves kept slapping onto the black Xianbing barrier, but the frigid air kept spreading along the ice flood. In just a blink of an eye, all the raging waves that rushed into the valley were frozen, and the entire valley was sealed in ice. Over 100,000 large demon beasts were frozen in the ice. Those with stronger cultivation base could still struggle in the ice, but all the demon beasts with a cultivation base below the demon core realm had their lives reaped in just a blink of an eye. Waiting Dragon King's brows twitched as he waved his hands and roared, "My boys, don't panic and be afraid. Just charge forward, charge forward. There are countless demons in my Longyuan River, so why would we be afraid of a mere few 100,000 of them? Use long-range spells. Use spells. You guys are 10 times more stupid than boars. Why are you rushing over?" Astonished, Wu Qi gave the old Dragon King a look, who was waving his arms and legs and foaming at the mouth. Hesitantly, he grabbed Catfish Flood Dragon's sleeve and asked, "Old Dragon King, have you never learned how to deploy an army? Has he never commanded an army in battle?" Catfish Flood Dragon turned her huge catfish head over, staring at Wu Qi with her pair of gleaming golden fish eyes as she asked in surprise, "Formation of troops? What does it do? Command the army to fight?" Sigh, the old Dragon King has lived in Longyuan River for tens of thousands of years, and no one has ever challenged him. So why is he commanding the army to fight? Wu Qi loosened his grip on Catfish Flood Dragon's sleeve and rolled his eyes. Once again, he prepared himself to flee at the first sign of danger. It seemed to him that apart from having an extremely strong cultivation base, this old Dragon King had no other strong points. Nevertheless, his temperament was very much to Wu Qi's liking. Although he was a cunning old fox, he was still a good man. Should he just watch him suffer a great defeat? While he was hesitating, several tens of thousands of demon beasts, including carps, green jades, snakeheads, grass carps, etc., suddenly rose into the sky on their demon clouds, opened their huge mouths and took a deep breath towards the river water in the distance. An immeasurable amount of river water rolled and flowed towards them, pouring into the stomachs of these demon beasts. Suddenly, the bodies of these fish demons, whose bodies were about 100 feet long and possessed the cultivation base of Xiantian realm, began to swell rapidly. In just a blink of an eye, their bodies had expanded to 300 feet to 500 feet. Their bodies were glowing brightly, nearly transparent, and their stomachs were filled with rolling river water. Abruptly, several tens of thousands of huge fish mouths aimed straight at the Qin army's campsite. Amidst ear-splitting whistling noises, several tens of thousands of water pillars, each as thick as a water bucket and moving at a speed not much slower than the sword beams, shot whistling towards the campsite, slamming viciously onto the thick and heavy Xianbing barrier that sealed off the entire valley. Amidst jarring screeches of friction, these rapidly spinning water pillars pierced through the Xianbing barrier like several tens of thousands of drilling drills, and in just a blink of an eye, they had penetrated a few miles deep into the barrier. Amidst the deafening cracking noises, countless cracks appeared on the Xianbing barrier, and even the bodies of the aquatic demon beasts trapped in the ice were shattered. The bodies of these fish demons shrunk rapidly, and the water in their stomachs was emptied in just a blink of an eye. All they could do was gasp for breath. Above the Qin army's campsite, another layer of misty white runes flashed. The layer of ice that was shattered by the water pillars shot out by these fish demons shattered abruptly, turning into countless ice swords and ice blades, each measuring about 10 feet long and looking extremely sharp. Abruptly, these white runes exploded, unleashing a tremendous explosive force that shattered the several tens of miles thick ice that filled the entire valley. Countless ice blades and ice swords shot out in all directions, accompanied by ear-splitting whistling noises. Wherever they went, the bodies of countless aquatic demon beasts would be ripped apart, their blood, internal organs, and scales splashing and filling the sky. Shrill and miserable howls of demon beasts could be heard everywhere. With just this single strike, over 300,000 Xiantian demon beasts gathered within an area of 100 miles were killed by these ice blades and ice swords. Broken limbs drifted everywhere along with the flood, while an enormous amount of blood dyed the entire area of 1,000 miles red. It was an enormous amount of blood from the bodies of 300,000 enormous demon beasts. At first glance, the entire place was dyed red, and even the great waves had turned into a blinding blood-red color. Waiting Dragon King's lips were trembling with anger. He threw his head back and gave a long and loud cry. The head of an old man with gray hair abruptly transformed into the head of a ferocious flood dragon, while his body abruptly rose to the height of 30 feet. Scales emerged from all over his body, transforming into a thick and heavy armor that covered his body. Meanwhile, both of his hands had transformed into a pair of dragon claws. When he clenched his fists tightly, the claws collided with the scales on his palms and produced a large amount of sparks. Kill them all. Kill them all. What are you waiting for? Han Zhu, Tan Shui, Le Hai, bring your children and charge. Waiting Dragon King cried out with a stern voice. Without hesitation, he ordered the three great demons to charge into the battlefield. Among the three great demons, the giant turtle called himself Han Zhu. He had been cultivating for several tens of thousands of years, and had produced 36 dragon balls on his back. This was the foundation for him to attain the Tao, and also the origin of his name. The giant crab called himself Tan Shui, as he loved to dig deep caves everywhere. Countless caves in Longyuan River were personally excavated by him, and that was the reason why he had this name. And the giant starfish was none other than Le Hai. He called himself Le Hai, but he actually lived in Longyuan River. He was a natural freak. Upon receiving the order from Old Dragon King, the three great demons immediately brought countless demon beasts and charged towards the Qin army's campsite. Right now, the Xianbing barrier was broken, and the Qin army's campsite was surrounded by the flood. All the demons could clearly see the beards on the faces of the Qin soldiers. It seemed that with just one charge, they would be able to break into the campsite and start a massacre. The giant turtle threw his head back and gave a long and sonorous cry into the sky. His body grew to 5 miles in circumference, coiling up a huge wave that stood 100,000 feet tall. Using himself as a weapon, he smashed forcefully towards the southwest corner of the Qin army's campsite. This giant turtle had a sturdy body and a huge body. He never liked to use divine abilities or dermic powers, and preferred to hurt his enemies with brute force. When it came to strength, apart from whinnying Dragon King, no one in Longyuan River could be his match. On the other side, the giant crab spun his body, transforming into a cone-shaped dark wind that spun at high speed and plunged into the ground. In just a blink of an eye, he had drilled deep into the ground. Suddenly, the ground of the Qin army camp began to shake violently, and one large pit after another was sunk into the ground. From these pits, all sorts of aquatic poisonous bugs kept shooting towards the nearby Qin soldiers like arrows, biting and stinging them. Meanwhile, the great starfish, Lehai, was seen hovering above the Qin army's campsite with a five-colored demon cloud behind him. He slowly stretched his body, and suddenly, tens of thousands of tiny eyes opened up under his enormous five-pointed star-shaped body. These eyes were blinking with five-colored gleams. In the blink of an eye, countless five-colored light needles shot towards the Qin army's campsite, bringing together a huge amount of five-colored sand and a faint fragrance. The third defensive mechanism of the Qin army's campsite had been activated. On the southwest corner of the campsite, 9 layers of yellow runes suddenly flashed and flashed, transforming into a thick and heavy yellow light barrier that greeted the giant turtle who was smashing down from above. A loud boom rang out. As the gigantic body of the giant turtle was too heavy, the yellow energy barrier was shattered into pieces, while a huge hole was ripped open on the defensive barrier near the southwest corner of the Qin army's campsite. Several thousand Qin soldiers did not manage to react in time, and were crushed into meat paste by Hanju's belly. Along with the loud boom, the ground of the Qin army's campsite began to light up with bronze runes. Suddenly, the soil and rock layer 10,000 feet under the ground of the campsite became a few times stronger than an iron that had been tempered 100 times. Suddenly, the hole that kept sinking was restored, and those poisonous bugs that rushed up to the ground were crushed to death by the Qin soldiers. Apart from a few hundred soldiers who were killed by the poisonous bug's stings, the rest of the people were unharmed. Loud noises kept coming out from underneath the campsite, and the ground was shaking violently. It was the sound of the giant crab attacking the underground energy veins of the campsite in a flurried and exasperated manner. Meanwhile, more defensive mechanisms were charging towards Lehai. Meanwhile, 90% of the attention of the practitioners hovering in midair was focused on this strange and huge demon, who should not have appeared in Longyuan River. One after another, they raised up their long banners and waved them. Along with their chanting, streams of dark mists kept rushing out, forming into several tens of thousands of ghost soldiers who looked like skeletons, clad in black armors and wielding long blades in their hands. Needles of 5 colors sprinkled down from the sky, and the ghost soldiers who had just taken shape let out miserable howls and vanished into nothingness amidst the needles. Wherever the needles went, all the runes and formations were shattered, and before the several hundred practitioners could change their defensive mechanisms to counter the enemy, the needles had already pierced through their bodies. These practitioners let out miserable howls, as their bodies suddenly transformed into wisps of 5-colored flame and quickly burned into nothingness. Hovering in the sky, Lehai took a deep breath. The 5-colored smoke produced by the burning of these practitioners quickly fused into his body, making his body grow bigger. Meanwhile, those 5-colored sand grains swept across the Qin campsite like a sandstorm. The bodies of several tens of thousands of Qin soldiers turned stiff when they were hit by the sand grains that contained a faint fragrance. All of a sudden, their bodies collapsed, turning into countless new 5-colored sand grains and joining the boundless sandstorm. Wu Qi looked at the 5-colored starfish, and was struck with great astonishment. This was an ancient species, the 5-light poisonous cold centipede, which was recorded in Scroll of Stealing. It had the shape of a starfish, but in fact, it was a poisonous insect born from a thread of vicious aura found in the heaven and earth. It was an expert in using 5-colored enchantment, and there was a thread of innate poisonous energy in its body, which was an expert in polluting magical treasures and souls, as well as breaking defensive mechanisms. The 5-light poisonous cold centipede was a quick-witted creature, and it was well versed in the Tao of heaven and earth. Therefore, there were only a few defensive mechanisms that could trap it. Therefore, in front of it, the defensive formation of the Qin campsite was easily torn apart like a piece of paper. It was not because Su Fu and the other practitioners were useless, but because they had bumped into a natural enemy. The five-light poisonous cold centipede did not know anything about the Tao of defensive mechanisms, and it could not even understand the simplest single-origin formation. However, its innate divine ability allowed it to restrain over 70% of all defensive mechanisms under the heaven. Strange creatures born from the natural energies were just that unreasonable. Wu Qi could not help but let out a loud laugh. Ying Zheng and the others were really unlucky this time. Slowly, Lahai stretched his body and flew towards the depth of the Qin campsite. Following behind him, the five-colored needles and five-colored sand kept rolling towards the Qin army. Seeing that Lahai alone could shake the entire formation of Qin army, Baiqi, who was standing right next to Ying Zheng, suddenly pulled out a strange-shaped bugle. Chapter 178. Wu Qi had been paying close attention to Ying Zheng and the others. When Baiqi pulled out the nearly 10 feet long bugle horn that looked like it was made from a crooked bone, Wu Qi immediately covered his ears and used the 7 holy deities and devils to guard his soul. Meanwhile, the silver lotus was wheeling and dancing in his spiritual ocean, shielding Wu Qi's 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls in the stamen of the lotus, while emitting a large amount of 5-colored light that surrounded him. Baiqi raised the bugle up high, took a deep breath, and blew into it with all his might. A sonorous and impassioned dragon roar echoed out. When the dragon roar was heard, there was no other sound between the heaven and earth, even the rolling sound of the great waves had vanished. The dragon roar was dignified and noble, filled with an ancient aura that came from the primordial era and could not be violated. It was as if a divine dragon with an incomparably venerable status had really descended to the mortal world and let out such a long and shocking roar. Upon hearing the dragon roar, Wanying Dragon King's body trembled, and he nearly spun and fled. Fortunately, he still remembered his identity as the Dragon King of Longyuan River, and managed to guard his mind, preventing himself from making a fool of himself in front of countless demon beasts. He clenched his fists tightly, stared at Baiqi with his bloodshot eyes, and roared, "A bugle horn made from the bone of Dragon Ing! A bugle horn made from the bone of the god of Dragon Ing! How could they have such a precious treasure in their hands?" In the ancient times, when the human emperor, Yu the Great, was trying to control the flood, countless aquatic demons and devils had gathered together and fought against him. The divine dragon, Dragon Ing, descended from the sky and intimidated all the demons with his mighty power, helping Yu the Great to control the flood. Dragon Ing himself was a superior divine dragon among the dragons, the leader of all aquatic demons under the heaven. On top of that, the virtues he achieved during the flood control had intimidated all demons, and he had become an existence like a deity in the hearts of countless aquatic demons under the heaven. The long and loud roar of Dragon Ing had a very strong deterrent and lethal force to these aquatic demons. Although it was only a bugle horn made from the bone of Ing Dragon and let out a dragon cry, all aquatic demon beasts who heard it, as long as they were below the Gold Core realm, had their heads exploded and died. With just a single dragon cry, over 1 million Xiantian realm aquatic demons within an area of 100 miles were killed. Countless venomous insects, big fishes, and other aquatic beasts that were hiding in the flood were killed. The surrounding flood suddenly turned crimson red, emitting a pungent smell of blood. Suddenly, 2 streams of blood spurted out from Baiqi's nostrils. Just now, he had mustered all his strength to blow this horn. Just this sound alone consumed the power that he had painstakingly cultivated for 60 years, and it almost caused his cultivation level to drop from the peak of the nascent soul stage by a small realm. Taking a deep breath, Baiqi looked at the ground of Qin army's campsite, which was still shaking violently. He turned to look at the gigantic turtle that was slowly rising and getting ready to smash down again, and the great demon Lahai, who was twisting his body and approaching him. He mustered all his energy and once again blew at the bugle horn with all his strength. A shrill dragon roar rang out once again. In an instant, countless aquatic demons in the surroundings were killed, and over 10,000 demon beasts who had formed their demon cores were knocked unconscious, swaying and drifting away along with the flood. Han Zhu, Tan Shui, and Le Hai had their bodies trembled at the same time. They let out loud roars at the same time, trying to cover the dragon roar of Dragon Ying's bugle horn. But, no matter how hard they roared, the dragon roar just kept coming out from the bugle horn, and was not affected by their roars at all. An arrow of blood sprayed out from the bugle horn, as Baichi had blown the bugle for the second time. Immediately, his cultivation base dropped from the peak of the nascent soul realm to the late stage of the nascent soul realm. The energy essence of his nascent soul was greatly damaged, and the source of his soul was wounded as well. Blood burst out from all 7 apertures of his. The arrow of blood came out from his mouth, shooting out along the bugle horn. Countless aquatic demons fled in all directions in a great panic. Facing the roar of Dragon Ying, they had no power to resist, and could only flee in a sorry state, following the deterrence and driving intent of the dragon roar. Apart from several thousand aquatic demons who had formed their demon cores and several hundred demon beasts who had formed their nascent souls, all the other aquatic demons and ordinary fishes, shrimps, turtles, and crabs hiding in the water had either died or fled for their lives. In just a blink of an eye, the surrounding water level had dropped to a depth of 1,000 feet, revealing the towering mountain ridges. Baichi let out a shrill howl. Suddenly, a blood-red flame burst out from his body, rolling and rolling like sticky blood and wrapping around his entire body. The nearly 10 feet thick blood-red flame was rocking and rocking, emitting a pungent smell of blood. Vaguely, one could see countless twisted human faces twisting and rolling amidst the blood-red flame, letting out shrill and miserable howls. Baichi gripped the bugle horn tightly, cried out with a shrill voice, "How dare a demon like you come here and act presumptuously? I, the Iron Blood Daqin, am not someone that you demons can underestimate. Daqin, Daqin, Daqin." Following Baichi's crazy howl, the several 100,000 Qin soldiers in the field headquarters raised the weapons in their hands, exerting all their strength, divine soul, and blood to burst into a thunderous roar, Daqin, Daqin, Daqin. The sonorous and impassioned roar shook the surrounding water and caused the surrounding mountains to crumble. It even shattered the fleshly bodies of several hundred weakest demon cores and water demons, leaving only Jin Dan, who was fleeing. The fierce murderous aura of several 100,000 Qin soldiers transformed into a blood-red murderous aura that one could see with naked eyes, shooting straight up into the sky. After that, it was attracted by the blood-red flame shrouding Baichi's body, fusing straight into Baichi's body. The blood-red flame rose and rose from Baichi's body, and his aura abruptly turned into a towering murderous aura, as if he was unparalleled in the world, as if he was wielding a sword and slaughtering all under the heaven. Baichi laughed ferociously, brought the bugle back to his mouth, and blew it once again. This time, it was not the dragon cry of Ing Long that echoed out, but the cry of "kill" that came together from countless captains and soldiers. The blood-red flame shrouding Baichi's body vanished abruptly, and a bloody murderous aura sprayed out from the bugle. It divided into 3 extremely strong murderous intents, shooting straight towards Han Zhu, Tan Shui, and Le Hai, the 3 great demons. The murderous intents were shapeless and intangible, but they could be seen with naked eyes, heard with ears, and felt with the body. 3 murderous intents shot out and smashed onto the bodies of 3 great demons almost at the same time they came out from the bugle. Le Hai howled miserably. One of his horns was cut off, and a huge amount of 5-colored blood sprayed out and fell onto the ground, corroding the ground and creating a huge hole. While trembling violently, Le Hai spun and fled. Countless light needles and fine sand kept flying back into his body, while the part of his body that was cut off disintegrated in an instant, turning into light needles and fine sand and fusing back into his body. Han Zhu let out a miserable shriek. Suddenly, a huge wound, about a mile long and several tens of feet wide, appeared on his 1,000 feet thick back armor. A huge amount of pale golden blood sprayed out from the wound, and tears kept bursting out from Han Zhu's eyes due to the severe pain. The giant turtle, who was known for its slow movement, was now moving its short limbs and sprinting back to whinnying Dragon King's side like a wild gust of wind. A loud boom that sounded like the collapse of a mountain and the cracking of the earth was heard coming from underneath the field headquarters, as the ground within the circumference of tens of miles suddenly collapsed. The giant crab howled miserably and kept spitting out countless white bubbles along the way, fleeing back to the camp with green blood stains all over his body. His left pincer had been cut off by the murderous intense, and sticky green blood kept bursting out from it. He kept howling and howling miserably, hiding behind Whinnying Dragon King's back. The three murderous intents shot out and severely wounded the three great demons. Baichi's skin burst open, and his blood sprayed all over the people around him. After unleashing this attack, Baichi, who was a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator, had his cultivation base drop to mid-stage nascent soul realm. Furthermore, his cultivation base was still dispersing, and it seemed like he could barely maintain the cultivation base of mid-stage nascent soul realm. However, with only a cultivation base of nascent soul realm, Baichi was able to defeat three great demons who had broken through to nascent soul and divine transformation realm. Wu Qi looked at Baichi, who now looked like a man covered in blood, and could not help but twitch his lips. How could the Daqin dynasty have so many precious treasures? A bugle made from the bones of Dragon Ing. How could they have such secret treasures? If not because of this bugle, when millions of aquatic demons risked their lives to attack the Qin army's field headquarters, even if Ingzheng really had the body of a divine dragon, he would still be smashed into a meat paste. But now, among the millions of aquatic demons, some had fled, and some were dead. Only a group of nascent soul and Jin Dan realm demon beasts were left behind, whose minds were disturbed by the dragon roar of Dragon Ing. What a good fellow, Baichi! He had gathered the murderous intent of several tens of thousands of Qin soldiers and turned it into a single strike that could injure a great demon of nascent divinity realm. The cultivation technique he cultivated was indeed overbearing and evil. Wu Qi stared at Baichi with bright eyes. He was worthy of being Baichi the human butcher, the Daqin Baichi who could kill 400,000 people without batting an eyelid. After Baichi fell to the ground, Li Xian, who was standing behind him, walked up and held tightly the bugle that had consumed a lot of energy. Ingzheng's laughter was heard coming from afar. Whinnying Dragon King, you don't have to bring out those useless subordinates of yours and make a fool of yourself. If you want to break into my Daqin's field headquarters, you will have to do it yourself. Hehe, with the bugle of Dragon Ing in your hand, how much of your dragon energy is suppressed? Whinnying Dragon King took a deep breath, stepped on a cloud and drifted forward, then laughed coldly and said, I've taken a fancy to the bugle made from the bones of Dragon Ing. Hehe, even though 50% of my dragon energy is suppressed by the roar of Dragon Ing, it is still a piece of cake for me to kill all of you. And, with your overall strength, how long can the bugle last? 3 breaths? 5 breaths? How many Earth Immortals of nascent soul realm do you have to waste on this? Amidst the strange laughter, Whinnying Dragon King's body began to expand, and gradually transformed into a muscular half-dragon half-human body, standing 50 feet tall with a dragon head and a human body, fully clad in a golden scale armor. His robe fluttered in the wind, revealing his muscular body with bulging muscles. Water vapor, clouds, and tiny electric arcs were coiling around his body, emanating a powerful aura that seemed to be unstoppable. With a wave of both hands, a pair of purple gold thunder hammers appeared in Whinnying Dragon King's hands. The handles were 40 feet long, and the hammerhead was twice the size of a large water tank. The pair of ridiculously huge hammers were shrouded in purple mist and golden light. Then, Whinnying Dragon King casually swung the hammers. Immediately, thunderclaps echoed out in the surroundings, and a violent storm came rolling down crazily once again. Great waves rose several thousand feet high from the ground, and countless thunderbolts struck onto the pair of hammers. The hammers burst out a large sheet of purple light like a flame, illuminating Whinnying Dragon King's entire body and giving him a frightening look. Wu Qi cast a covetous glance at the pair of purple gold thunder hammers in Whinnying Dragon King's hands. They were definitely a pair of spirit items, and they were of excellent quality. The one who forged this pair of hammers must be a top-notch grandmaster craftsman. Although there were not many formations and restrictive spells in the hammers, all of them were of excellent quality. They were perfectly integrated with each other, and had brought out the full power of the materials used in the hammers and the restrictive spells. As for this pair of hammers, Wu Qi did not have any intention of coveting it. Without even trying, he knew that the weight of this pair of hammers was incredibly heavy. Except for Wanying Dragon King, there was no one else that Wuqi could carry it. This pair of hammers was a heavy weapon used for close combat, not a magical treasure that could be controlled by spells. The hammers collided forcefully with each other. Wanying Dragon King let out a ferocious laugh, raised the hammers and leaped towards Ingzheng. Ingzheng, you little bastard! Blow, blow for Lao Tzu! Blow, blow for Lao Tzu! Wanying Dragon King's strange laughter shook the surrounding great waves, causing them to roll and roll. Following his movement, the huge waves crazily slapped towards the Qin army's field headquarters. Ingzheng's face turned unsightly, while Li Xian held the bugle tightly and blew the bone bugle. A shrill and sonorous dragon cry rang out, as more than half of the mist and water vapor on Wanying Dragon King's body dissipated. The shadows of 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent emerged behind Ingzheng's back. He took a deep breath, then suddenly pulled out an 8 feet long, strangely shaped heavy sword, swinging it towards Wanying Dragon King. A loud boom rang out as the pair of hammers and the heavy sword clashed together. Chapter 179. The heavy sword held in Ingzheng's hand was 8 feet and 1 inch long, the width of an adult's palm, and the thickest part of the sword ridge was 3 fingers thick. The surface of the sword was as bright as a mirror, emitting a faint purple glow and yellow glow. Under the yellow and purple glow, on the mirror-like surface of the sword, there were images of rivers and mountains, forests and grasslands, towns and villages, and all sorts of living beings. Above all these images, amidst the yellow and purple glow, were 9 divine dragons, bearing their fangs and brandishing their claws, twisting and wheeling in the air. A loud boom rang out, and sparks flew in all directions. The purple glow transformed into airwaves that could destroy everything and spread in all directions. When the airwaves were still tens of miles away from the wooden city, they were shattered into pieces. Wanying Dragon King's body did not move, and he was still hovering on top of the cloud. However, a white mark could be seen on both of his hammers, as they were damaged by Ingzheng's heavy sword. Ingzheng was knocked flying several thousand feet away by the heavy hammers. The extremely heavy impact had opened up countless wounds on his body, and blood kept oozing out from them. However, his heavy sword was not damaged at all. Ingzheng smashed heavily onto the ground, sinking several hundred feet deep into the ground. While coughing blood, he dragged the heavy sword and slowly climbed up from the pit. Laughing out loud, he looked at Wanying Dragon King and said, "Evil dragon, how is the power of my natal divine weapon, the sword of Qin Emperor?" He raised the sword up high and swung it down forcefully. Suddenly, countless chants of "Long live the Emperor" rang out in the sky. Amidst the thunderous chants, a few miles long, deep cracks suddenly appeared on the ground where the tip of the sword pointed. Wanying Dragon King's face twisted, as he stared fixedly at the tiny crack on the head of the hammers, which was smaller than a strand of hair. A frightening gurgling noise was heard coming from his throat. Clouds began to rise from his body, shooting up several tens of thousands of feet into the sky like an erupting volcano. After the time it took to finish a pot of tea, Wanying Dragon King finally let out a stern roar, "Kid, how dare you damage my treasure?" Abruptly, both hammers flew out from his hands. One of them smashed towards Ingzheng, and the other towards Li Xian, who was standing on top of the wooden city wall and blew the bugle just now. The dragon cry just now had suppressed over 50% of the dragon energies in Wanying Dragon King's body, and the force exerted on his hammers was greatly weakened. Even the item spirit of the thunder hammer had its spirituality suppressed by half. That was why it was wounded by the sword of Qin Emperor. The bone of Ing Dragon brought too much of a threat to all aquatic creatures. Therefore, Wanying Dragon King had made up his mind to kill Li Xian first. The heavy hammer whistled as it flew out, bringing with it a sky full of thunder and lightning. Tens of thousands of thunderbolts whizzed down from the sky. With the 2 hammer heads as the focal point, the thunderbolts brought with them monstrous electric flames. There was nothing else between heaven and earth, only the 2 hammerheads shining with dazzling lightning attracted everyone's attention. Clenching the sword of Qin Emperor tightly with both hands, Yingzhen cried out sternly, "Li Xian, get out of the way." Amidst the long and shrill cries of 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent, a great amount of blood burst out from Yingzheng's body once again. Abruptly, his body grew taller by 1 foot, and he thrust the sword with all his might towards the heavy hammer that was falling down from above. The 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic used the blood essence and soul of flood dragons as the cultivation materials, and it was also a divine ability that cultivated both the fleshly body, soul, and magical power at the same time. In terms of fleshly body alone, Yingzheng's strength was one of the strongest. However, Weining Dragon King's strength had gone beyond the limit that Yingzheng could handle. He was an old monster who had been cultivating arduously for several tens of thousands of years, and had tempered his fleshly body to the limit of demon dragons, almost ready to ascend into a true dragon. The weight of the thunder hammer was incredibly heavy as well, and when it was thrown out by the old dragon with all his strength, the force was more than enough to destroy a small planet. Clang! The skin on both of Yingzheng's arms exploded, sending blood and flesh flying in all directions. A large amount of pale golden blood dripped onto the ground, merging with the blood of countless dead aquatic demon beasts. Yingzheng was smashed deep into the ground by the heavy hammer. The loud rumbling of the hammer shattered the ground, bringing Yingzheng down to a depth of 30,000 feet. The tremendous force shook Yingzheng to the point that his internal organs were riddled with countless cracks, and his body was nearly shattered into pieces. On top of the city wall, Li Xian held the bugle tightly, and once again blew it without caring about anything. The dragon roar of Dragon King echoed out once again. Weining Dragon King's body trembled, as the dragon energies in his body were suppressed by another 50%. He let out a long and furious roar, gave Li Xian a fierce glare, and suddenly waved both of his hands towards the great waves in the distance, coiling up several dozens of huge water dragons and rushing towards the top of the city wall. Li Si came before Li Xian, who was bleeding from his 7 apertures. The scroll was hovering before him, emitting a pale golden gleam. With a calm expression, he wrote over 100 characters on the scroll in a row. After that, he flicked the tip of his brush and picked out over 100 murderous characters from the scroll. Then, they transformed into a faint silver light and flew towards the heavy hammer that was smashing down from above. The forward momentum of the heavy hammer halted abruptly, as the invisible force collided with it and produced a loud, ear-splitting boom. Li Si's body trembled, as several dozens of thunderbolts suddenly shot out from the hammer and smashed forcefully onto his body. The black robe worn by Li Si expanded abruptly, transforming into a clump of dark cloud that covered his entire body. The thunderbolts smashed into the dark cloud and exploded, causing it to roll and scatter. Li Si's body kept suffering from heavy blows, causing him to open his mouth and cough out a mouthful of blood. Chi-Chi, a group of several dozens of men who were dressed like scholars, gathered behind Li Si. They lined up in a strange formation, pulling out seals, scrolls, writing brushes, iron rulers, chains, and many other objects. Then, they recited a long and sonorous chant in unison. The law is the one who compiles the books and records, sets them in the government, and distributes them to the common people. The law follows the law of the heaven and earth, and rules all living beings. The law draws the Tao of the heaven and earth, and rules all living beings. Following the chanting of these men, all kinds of strange magical items in their hands began to emit a golden gleam, which kept injecting into Li Si's body. A bright golden gleam burst out from Li Si's body. Abruptly, he pulled out a seal, raised it up towards the sky and cried out sternly, "The law follows the heaven, the Tao of the heaven and earth becomes the commandment of all living beings. What are you waiting for if not now?" Then, he flipped the seal, unleashing a beam of golden gleam towards the thunder hammer that kept falling down from the sky. A miserable cry rang out, as Weining Dragon King's heavy hammer suddenly spun in the air, falling down from the sky like a bird with broken wings. Weining Dragon King was caught unprepared, and before he could figure out the logic behind Li Si's strange attack, the beam of golden gleam had already smashed heavily onto his body. The yellow gleam itself did not possess any offensive strength, but it came with a strange commandment force. The clouds surrounding the old dragon vanished abruptly, and he fell down from the sky like an ordinary mortal, nearly falling to the ground. Fortunately, he reacted in time. He let out a furious roar and hastily stepped onto a cloud and flew back up into the sky. However, he had lost a great deal of face, and his face was flushed red with anger. Once again, Li Si waved the seal toward the approaching water dragon. Grinning coldly, he said, "The human emperor is here. Why don't you disperse your puny demonic technique?" Following Li Si's rebuke, the water dragon summoned by Wanying Dragon King with his mighty magical power was shattered instantly. Countless streams of water shot down from the sky, and a heavy rainstorm began to pour down from the sky. Wu Qi was shocked by what he saw. Li Si's divine ability of verbal compliance was close to a monstrous level. Wu Qi had no idea how he managed to comprehend this divine ability. However, this divine ability was not suitable for Wu Qi. It was a divine ability that had a great limitation, as it was created by borrowing the willpower of others. It did not bring much benefit to the user, and thus, Wu Qi was not interested in it. Wanying Dragon King waved his arms and summoned the two heavy hammers back into his hands. Then, he turned to Li Si and roared furiously, "You bunch of juniors, all of you will die here today. You are going to make me mad." Then, Wanying Dragon General's body swelled up once again. This time, he no longer played any feints. Instead, he simply swung the two huge hammers and swung them crazily towards the top of the city wall, as if he was forging iron. He did not care what kind of divine ability or magical ability it was, as he would rely on his incredibly powerful dragon body and tremendous strength to smash all of them into meat paste. He wanted to see what kind of tricks they could come up with. Right at this critical moment when Wanying Dragon King flew into a rage out of humiliation, Wu Qi suddenly discovered that the several 100,000 soldiers in the Qin army's campsite outside the wooden city had lined up into a strange formation. At the center of the formation stood a huge, dark green cauldron, with 3 legs and a height of 49 feet. Su Fu was leading several hundred practitioners, walking and dancing around the cauldron while reciting some strange incantations. As they were reciting the incantations, the blood of over 1 million aquatic demon beasts who died tragically in the battle, together with the pale golden blood that Ingzheng spilled on the ground, were all sucked into the cauldron. All the blood seemed to have teleported, as it disappeared from where it was and reappeared in the cauldron. On the surface of the cauldron, there were pictures of farmers farming, fishermen fishing, shepherds grazing, woodcutters chopping firewood, mountains, rivers, and countless strange beasts, insects, and fishes. As the blood kept being injected into the cauldron, various patterns on its surface began to emit a faint glow. A suffocating, vigorous, and thick pressure, which felt like a boundless ocean and a bottomless abyss, was gradually unleashed from the cauldron, bringing along an ancient aura. This was... A cold gleam flickered in Wu Qi's eyes. He had already recognized the origin of this cauldron. It was the same cauldron that was crafted by the human emperor, Yu the Great. During his journey of conquering the flood, he used his mighty divine ability to suppress countless aquatic demon beasts who were subdued by Yinglong. The name of this cauldron was the Universal Water Spirit's Divine Cauldron of Yu the Great, a frightening magical treasure that specialized in suppressing all kinds of aquatic demon beasts. This treasure had broken away from the classification of magical item, magical treasure, spirit item, and immortal item. Because of the virtue of conquering the flood that had gathered on it, it had evolved into an acquired item of virtue, possessing a mighty power and the ability to suppress the fate of a kingdom. It was more than enough to ensure that the fate of a kingdom would last for a long time, and not be affected by any external forces. To put it bluntly, the power of this cauldron was simply too strong. As long as it was guarding the kingdom, anyone who wanted to attack the kingdom would have to weigh their overall strength. If they did not have enough overall strength, they would be killed by the cauldron. Naturally, the kingdom would last for a long time, and this was the logic of the so-called long fate. As the Universal Water Spirit's Divine Cauldron of Yu the Great gradually unleashed a mighty aura, all the flood dragons and demon beasts, including Catfish Flood Dragon, began to tremble violently. They could not control themselves and fled into the distance, not even daring to turn their heads back. Waining Dragon King, who was in the middle of unleashing his mighty aura, turned his head around and stared at the cauldron that was slowly floating up into the sky. Abruptly, he stuck out his long tongue and screamed, "Damn it! This is. You bunch of bastards! How could you have this thing in your hands?" Casually putting away the hammers, Waining Dragon King spun and left without even snorting. He transformed into a golden flood dragon that measured several thousand feet long, brought up a strong gust of wind as he spun and fled. His speed was at least 100 times faster than Catfish Flood Dragon and the other aquatic demons. Although his cultivation base was nearly at the level of Heaven Immortal, he did not have the courage to fight head-on against this frightening treasure that was said to be able to intimidate all aquatic demons under the heaven. Seeing all the demon beasts fleeing for their lives, Wu Qi twisted his body and abruptly transformed into a clump of water vapor, merging into the flood that filled the ground. At this point in time, the area 10,000 miles in circumference was filled with raging waves. Using the escape art of water was the best and fastest way to flee. Just when he had fled tens of miles away, he heard a loud boom coming from the sky. A beam of green light shot out from the cauldron of Yu and landed on Waining Dragon King's back. Waining Dragon King's body turned stiff. Countless scales on his back were shattered, and a mouthful of blood, mixed with raging flame, burst out from his mouth and shot out several thousand feet away. He cried out in pain, then fled in a sorry state, leaving behind a shrill whistle of wind breaking. In just a blink of an eye, he was nowhere to be found. Muffled explosions kept ringing out. Among the several 100,000 Qin soldiers, at least several tens of thousands of them could not withstand the frightening counterforce when the Cauldron of Yu was activated. Their bodies exploded one after another, turning into a rain of blood that blotted the sky. The few hundred practitioners around Su Fu were howling miserably. Nearly half of them were killed by the explosion, while the rest fell to the ground with blood gushing out from their 7 apertures, unable to move anymore. Su Fu's body turned stiff, and he fell straight down to the ground, rolling his eyes and fainting on the spot. Both sides were severely wounded. Neither Daqin nor those aquatic demons could gain the upper hand. Chapter 180. The flood had receded, and huge trees that were knocked down by the flood could be seen everywhere. The red sun hung high in the sky, while the jarring sound of a bugle echoed out from the camp of Qin army. The remaining less than 200,000 Qin soldiers trod on wing-shaped magical items, each carrying a porcelain jar filled with the ashes of their comrades. They lined up neatly and flew toward the northwest direction. A dragon chariot pulled by 9 black dragon horses was seen flying in the center of the formation, surrounded by a large troop of Qin soldiers. The huge cauldron of Yu was hovering above the dragon chariot, emitting a faint dark green glow, threatening all the aquatic demons and devils that might come back. Even if they were retreating, the Qin army would never give the enemy any chance to attack them. Wu Qi stood on the peak of a lofty mountain that was washed away by the flood, looking at the retreating Qin army with a gloating smile on his face. After that, he breathed out a deep sigh. Although the Qin army had suffered a great loss this time, it was not a serious injury. None of those important ministers and generals were killed, but many soldiers and practitioners were killed. For Daqin dynasty, this was just a drop in the ocean. It was a pity that they could not cause a greater loss to the Qin army, and could not gain more benefits from them. Wu Qi looked at the retreating Qin army with envy, breathed out a deep sigh and said, "Isn't the old Dragon King going to chase after them? Perhaps they don't have the strength to activate the Cauldron of Yu anymore." Although the Cauldron of Yu possessed a tremendous power, how could an ancient item of virtue be controlled by a mere nascent soul cultivator? Su Fu had gathered the blood essence of countless aquatic demons that had died tragically, and together with a thread of human emperor's blood essence found in Ing Zheng's body, he had barely activated the Cauldron of Yu and wounded Waining Dragon King with just one strike. Wu Qi believed that as of now, the Qin army did not have the strength to activate this precious treasure. If Waining Dragon King reorganized his army and chased after them, there was a high chance that the entire Qin army would be wiped out here. Standing right next to Wu Qi, the Catfish Flood Dragon, Han Zhu, Tan Shui, and Le Hai, the three great demons who had transformed into their human forms, shook their heads with fear and said, "We can't do it, we can't. That treasure is specialized in restraining us, the aquatic demons. We can never get close to it. Other than the old Dragon King, no one could withstand its breath." However, this time, the old Dragon King's spine was broken, and 2 of his dragon tendons were also broken. Without 10 years of recuperation, his cultivation will not be able to recover. Wu Qi didn't say anything. Wei Dragon King's injury was definitely not as serious as he claimed. This old demon dragon was afraid of death. He would be able to ascend to become a true dragon as long as he survived the last thunder calamity. At this critical juncture, he dared not take any more risks. On the eve of ascension, it would really be a joke if he were to accidentally suffer heavy injuries and die. The longer a living being lived, the more afraid they would be of death. This logic could be applied to Wei Dragon King as well. Sighing softly, Wu Qi shook his head and said, "We can only watch them leave." Catfish Flood Dragon and the few great demons breathed a long sigh of relief, as if they were sending off a plague god, and said, "We can only watch them leave." Wu Qi looked at the few water-kind spirit creatures. He truly didn't want to see their relaxed smiles. He sneered and said, "They have left, but they will come back. Don't forget that Yingzheng is going to cultivate the 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic. He still lacks the blood essence and soul of a flood dragon, and with that, he will be able to cultivate the first divine ability and attain the cultivation base of Heaven Immortal. When they come back, Catfish Flood Dragon's dark face instantly turned pale. She opened her mouth wide and did not say a word for a long while. On the other side, Han Zhu, Tan Shui, and Le Hai breathed out a long sigh of relief. They looked at Catfish Flood Dragon with a pitying expression, breathed out a long sigh at the same time and said, "It's the blood essence and soul of a flood dragon." Catfish Flood Dragon blinked her eyes, stomped her feet, and suddenly cried out, "I can't live in Longyuan River anymore. I can't live here anymore. I want to move. I want to move. I can't live in the Western Ocean, and those people have retreated to the Western Ocean. I want to find a new place to stay in the Eastern Ocean. I'll go find the old Dragon King now, and ask him to write me an official document, asking me to move to the Eastern Ocean." Shaking her head, Catfish Flood Dragon stomped her feet, spun and left. But after a few steps, Catfish Flood Dragon spun again, clenched her jaws tightly, and pulled out 36 pale golden scales from her body. She gave them to Wu Qi and said, "Little brother Wu Qi, thank you for saving my life. I don't even know the use of most of the treasures in Sea Catfish's cave. These are just some meager things, and I can't repay you for saving my life. These scales are of great use to you human cultivators, so I'll give them to you." Wu Qi stared blankly at the scales in his hand, then threw his head back and breathed out a long sigh. A kind person, she was definitely a kind person. He had taken away all the treasures in Catfish Flood Dragon's cave, 30% of her blood essence, and the flood dragon body tempering technique she had learned. He was already very satisfied with the gains, but she still took the initiative to give him 36 dragon scales. How could he accept that? Wu Qi took over the dragon scales, looked at Catfish Flood Dragon, nodded his head and said, "It's just a trivial matter, not worth mentioning. In the future, if you need Wu Qi's help, just go to Duke Yan Li's mansion in Ji City, the capital city of Great Yan Dynasty, and look for him." Catfish Flood Dragon and the 3 great demons exchanged a glance, then shook their heads at the same time and said, "We can't go there. We, the aquatic clan, can't leave the shore for more than 10,000 miles. We've heard about Ji City, a place where there are some demons who have cultivated into the form of birds in the forest, serving as great Yan sinecures. There are 3 beast kings, 2 bird kings, and a few demon kings who live in seclusion, all of whom are great Yan sinecures. But for us, the aquatic clan, our power will be greatly reduced once we leave the water, and it's not comfortable to stay on the shore. So, we won't go there." Le Hai sneered and said, "We, the aquatic clan of Longyuan River, have a grudge with the subordinates of those few beasts. They have already become great Yan sinecures, so how can we go there? If we go there, we might not be able to come back. Although those old demons are staying in the depth of Meng Mountains, and they only listen to the imperial edict of Great Yan Dynasty, many of their disciples and grand-disciples are serving in Great Yan Dynasty. The grudge between us, the aquatic clan of Longyuan River, and them is too deep. We can't go to Ji City. The few aquatic demons shook their heads, then stepped onto their demon clouds and flew towards Longyuan River. On the other hand, Wu Qi was taken aback by the news they revealed. The few demon kings who shared the same fame as Wanying Dragon King were actually Great Yan Dynasty's sinecures. But, why didn't Yan Dan and his brothers tell him about this? But, when he thought about it, weren't Xiong Qing and his brothers demon bears who lived in the forest? Since all 12 of them had joined Great Yan Dynasty and become the imperial guards, how could their parents and other seniors be related to Great Yan Dynasty? Looking at the demon clouds that were flying away, Wu Qi shook his head lightly. Sure enough, he could never underestimate anyone under the heaven. Yan Dan actually had such a trump card hidden in his sleeve. If that was the case, wasn't the so-called 13 immortal sects of Great Yan Dynasty just a joke? What was the use of these 13 immortal sects? Were they trying to fool the people under the heaven? Wu Qi turned his head and looked at the Qin army that was about to disappear into the distance. He breathed out a long sigh. Fortunately, the Qin army did not leave Meng Mountains to attack Great Yan Dynasty. Otherwise, if those sinecures of Great Yan Dynasty were to strike, the Qin army would be in big trouble. No wonder Yan Dan dared to be so lenient. No wonder he had been in a secluded cultivation for so many years, ignoring all the affairs of the imperial court, and the internal affairs of Great Yan Dynasty were in a mess. As long as there were demon kings who had cultivated their nascent divinity, he had no fear of someone plotting to usurp the throne. It's a pity that I, Wu Qi, have to bear the blame for nothing. Everyone under the heaven thinks that I'm the one who wiped out Wei Merchant. Who should I tell this injustice to? Lu Buwei. Oh Lu Buwei, please don't seek revenge from me. Breathing out another long sigh, Wu Qi too stepped on a beam of light and plunged into the ground, heading towards one of his secret caves in a far distance. In the secret cave, Wu Qi spent half a month, consuming all the nearly 100 Jin Dan he had collected this time. Finally, all 10 false cores produced a thread of innate nectar essence that belonged to Wu Qi himself. The misty false cores began to glow with a faint silver gleam, and their quality was much denser than before. Wu Qi's cultivation base had suddenly become a few times stronger. While absorbing the Jin Dan essence, he was also constantly digesting Catfish Flood Dragon's blood essence, strengthening and tempering his fleshly body. The black pearl used by Catfish Flood Dragon was the same as the acquired pearl of fire element that Wu Qi owned now. It was a natural spirit pearl formed by the acquired water essence, and it contained a very powerful water essence energy, which made it extremely powerful. After a preliminary refinement, Wu Qi placed it in his dantian, constantly nourishing and refining it with his own energy essence. The fire and water pearls were spinning in the shape of a taiji in his dantian. Nourished by the two pearls, the energies in Wu Qi's heart and kidneys became stronger and stronger, and the strength of his blood and energy was greatly improved as well. However, the several dozens of treasures found in Catfish Flood Dragon's mansion greatly exceeded Wu Qi's expectation. That Catfish King's mansion should be the Immortal's cave that Catfish Flood Dragon found accidentally, and those treasures should be the treasures she found accidentally in the cave as well. All these treasures were refined by her ancestors, and were very powerful magical treasures. Presumably, Catfish Flood Dragon's mansion used to be the Immortal's cave of a senior cultivator. Among these treasures, most of them were lower-grade magical treasures, but only a small diamond-shaped mirror stood out from the rest. It was a beautiful diamond-shaped mirror, with ancient and heavy runes densely intertwined on its back. Vaguely, large sheets of watery clouds could be seen appearing and disappearing on the surface of the mirror. On the back of the mirror was a small button made from 3 Chinese alligators, and on top of it were 2 characters, Cold Electric, that were carved with very fine writing. Wu Qi sent his divine sense into the mirror, and vaguely sensed a faintly discernible divine will hiding in it. It was a mirror that had almost turned into a spirit of its own, and was about to give birth to its own item spirit. Perhaps because Catfish Flood Dragon did not inherit the specific legacy, she did not discover the advantages of the mirror. Instead, she kept it in the cave carelessly, and did not even prepare to take it out to fight the enemy. In Wu Qi's eyes, this cold electric mirror was even more precious than some spirit water pearls. But too bad, in Catfish Flood Dragon's hands, it was like a pearl covered in dust, and did not bring out its full potential. He casually wiped the surface of the mirror, injected a thread of energy into it, then performed an incantation gesture with his left hand according to the runes on the back of the mirror, unleashing a beam of spirit light and shaking it on the surface. Immediately, an auspicious light flashed on the surface of the mirror, as several dozens of tiny electric arcs shot out from it, hitting a small cliff several miles away. Soundlessly, thunderbolts exploded, and the cliff, which stood 1,000 feet tall, instantly turned into fine dust that drifted in the air. No matter it was the electric arcs or the thunderbolts exploding, none of them made any sound. It truly lived up to its name of cold electric. Wu Qi was extremely satisfied with this mirror, as it was a supreme treasure that could be used to launch sneak attacks from the back and launch sneak attacks at the enemy. With this cold electric mirror, all the crossbows in his storage ring could finally be retired. After fiddling with the mirror for a while, he pinched his fingers and calculated the time since he came to Meng Mountains, and Wu Qi was shocked. So much time had passed without him noticing. He sprung to his feet hastily, carefully using the teleportation formation to leave the secret cave, then stepped on his sword beam and flew away from the mountain. A few days later, Wu Qi had left Meng Mountains and landed on the outskirts of Meng Village. Right when he stepped into Meng Village, which was now crowded with people and filled with piles of building materials, Meng Xiaobai immediately came running toward him. "Big brother, you're finally back. According to your plan, Duke Qingfeng has reached the last step, and he is about to succeed." He paused for a brief moment, then smiled bitterly and said, "But, there are a few talisman masters from Heavenly Spirit sect guarding the capital city of Gao Ling Kingdom, so it's not easy for Duke Qingfeng to strike." Upon hearing Meng Xiaobai's words, Wu Qi could not help but be filled with anger. Heavenly Spirit sect again. Heavenly Spirit sect again. Chapter 181. Ji City. A light snow had just fallen, and the fertile land several tens of thousands of miles outside the city had turned into a sheet of white. Smoke could be seen lingering in the sky of countless villages and towns. The faint smoke mixed with cold air and frost had covered the sky, making it so dark that not even a single ray of sunlight could be seen. The cold wind blew across the wasteland in the early winter, sounding like the howling of millions upon millions of ferocious ghosts. From time to time, large sheets of snow would be rolled up and sent flying in all directions. 1,500 miles west of the city, in a peach forest that was covered with a thin layer of snow, a black dot suddenly shot out from the void. In just a blink of an eye, it expanded into a dark sphere that measured several tens of feet in circumference. Tiny electric arcs burst out from the dark sphere, smashing the soil and rocks on the ground and creating numerous deep pits of different sizes. Accompanied by a series of tiny explosive noises, the dark sphere lasted for less than 2 seconds before it disappeared abruptly. A few middle-aged men clad in luxurious robes emerged from the disappearing dark sphere, escorted by a dozen cultivators who were brimming with spirit. They glanced around, then one of the men pulled out a map and casually cast a beam of light on it. A large sheet of light rushed out from the map, revealing the topographic map of the area several tens of thousands of miles in circumference of Ji City. A tiny golden dot was blinking on the map, marking their location. The myriad miles star fire talisman that Patriarch found in the mansion of an immortal is truly marvelous. Despite the distance of several tens of millions of miles, it still brought us straight into the territory of Great Yan Dynasty. However, the direction is slightly deviated by over 1,000 miles. This is caused by our lack of cultivation base. The middle-aged man who was holding the map smiled pleasantly and said, "If Patriarch were to cast the talisman himself with it, perhaps we could have teleported straight to the city gate of G City without any error." Another middle-aged man solemnly placed a translucent, pale golden talisman made from some strange material into his storage ring. It was a talisman that kept shooting out large sheets of starlight. He nodded and said with a smile, "Of course. Since Patriarch has once again encountered an immortal fate, perhaps he will have the chance to break through into nascent soul and divinity. Once Patriarch succeeds in his mission, who will we have to fear in this world?" The few middle-aged men laughed joyfully, then together with the cultivators behind them, they rode on their sword beams and flew towards G City. The sword beams moved at an incredible speed. After they had traveled over 1,000 miles, they finally stopped and began walking towards G City. All of them were Earth immortals of nascent soul realm, and some even had the cultivation base of peak stage human immortals of Gene Dan realm. Although they were walking, their speed was incredibly fast. With just a single step, they could travel a distance of several thousand feet. Not long after that, they arrived at the front gate of G City. As they were dressed luxuriously and had an extraordinary bearing, the city guards who guarded the entrance didn't give them too much trouble, and allowed them to enter G City. Wearing a reserved smile on their faces, the group of men rented a few luxurious coaches from a coach shop near the city gate. After that, they ordered with a loud and clear voice, "Go to Wei Merchant in Fugue Alley of Middle One City." Several coachmen responded with a louder and crisper voice. Then, they whipped the horses several times, and drove the carriages toward the central first city at a fast speed. There was still a distance of over 100 miles from the outermost city gate to the central first city. Although the roads in G City were wide and spacious, and the beasts pulling these coaches were all extraordinary beasts with incredible speed, it would still take them 4 to 6 hours to reach their destination. Right when the few coaches walked out from the front gate of the coach shop, a couple dozens of faintly discernible dark shadows darted out from the back of the coach shop, quickly heading towards different places in G City. A couple dozens of golden-winged swifts, who were small in size but flying at an incredible speed, silently flew up from the residential houses around the coach shop, flying quickly towards all the administrative offices of Scouting Office, Swallows, Criminal and Justice Court, and many other departments of violence. Wherever the few coaches went, the city gates were closed one after another. A large number of soldiers from the city guards rushed up to the top of the city wall, firing all kinds of powerful crossbows and bolts. All the bolts were glinting with the unique glow of runes and energy stones. These powerful crossbows and bolts had the power to threaten cultivators, and were all lethal weapons crafted by the craftsmen from Mo sect. Even a Gene Dan human immortal would be killed on the spot if he was hit by one of these bolts. The number of sky patrolling eagle guards who were flying and wheeling in the sky on their daily patrol duty had gradually increased. Originally, a group of sky patrolling eagle guards was responsible for the daily patrol of 3 to 5 neighborhoods, but now, the number of sky patrolling eagle guards had increased to 2 groups of sky patrolling eagle guards, who were responsible for the surveillance of a single neighborhood. Above every high point in the city, green and red lights were flashing and blinking. A large number of beast warriors from Scouting Office had emerged, guarding these important spots. In the streets and alleys where the few coaches passed by, the number of peddlers, and miscellaneous people had increased abruptly. Using countless excuses that they could not find any loopholes, they joked and laughed as they walked through the streets and alleys. It was as if an invisible net had tightly surrounded the few coaches. When the sky was about to turn dark, the few coaches arrived at the entrance of Wei Merchant, which was ablaze with bright lights. The Wei Merchant, which had been thoroughly cleaned up, looked exactly the same as when Wei Xiaoxiao was still here. Guards clad in the uniform of Wei Merchant were still standing before the entrance, and the gatekeepers and coachmen were still waiting in the gatehouse. A couple dozens of handsome mounts were tied to the posts in front of the entrance. These mounts were kicking their hooves impatiently, while a few coachmen were trying to calm them down. Tens of luxurious coaches were parked before the entrance of the merchant. Obviously, some distinguished guests were paying a visit. Vaguely, the sound of a bell could be heard coming out from the inside of the merchant. The tune was graceful and melodious, like the tune of the heavens. A few middle-aged men alighted from the coaches, casually tossing a few thumb-sized ocean pearls to a few coachmen as payment. After that, they walked into the merchant with their heads held high and chests puffed out, escorted by the cultivators who came with them. Hanging on their belts were the purple gold medallions that only the core members of Wei Merchant would have. It indicated that they were people with a status equal to Wei Xiaoxiao. The servants and guards at the entrance dared not to show any neglect, and hastily welcomed them into the merchant. The few coachmen picked up those valuable ocean pearls and fiddled with them for a while. Then, with a cold smile on his face, Chi-Chi turned to the few middle-aged men and shouted, "Thank you, Great Master, for your generous gift. May Great Master live a peaceful life, and live a prosperous life for generations to come. May you have hundreds of children and thousands of grandchildren, and may you live a long and prosperous life." Amidst the long and loud shout, the few coachmen slowly drove the coaches away from Wei Merchant. The front door of the merchant was tightly shut. Soundlessly, over 300 Jin Dan cultivators strode into the merchant, quickly placing pieces of pre-made formation discs on the ground. In just a blink of an eye, they had laid out 3 layers of formations around Wei Merchant. With Wei Merchant as the center, all the ordinary people living in the nearby streets were evacuated, and all the open spaces were filled with formation discs of various colors. A great number of Jin Dan and nascent soul cultivators were bustling about nervously among the formation discs, linking them together and forming into a complete formation. All the formations were mainly used for restraining and trapping, and there were no dangerous killing formations. The few middle-aged men strode towards the main hall of the merchant. When they were still several tens of feet away from each other, one of them laughed out loud and said, "Xiao, your father, have come to see you. Ha ha ha, you've done a good job here. When your father heard Patriarch praising you, I feel very gratified." The drumming in the main hall did not stop, but there was no answer from Wei Xiaoxiao. The few middle-aged men brought a group of people and strode into the main hall, but they were taken aback by what they saw. Apart from the nearly 100 musicians who were playing the musical instruments in the hall, only Yan Dan was seen sitting right in the middle of the hall. A middle-aged man, clad in a long white robe, with a crane overcoat draped over his shoulders and 9 crowns on his head, was sitting right next to Yan Dan, chatting with Yan Dan with a faint smile on his face. When the few people from Wei clan walked into the hall, they happened to hear the man talking to Yan Dan with a voice that was as gentle as jade, without any impurities. "Princess Zhanglu has reached the age of marriage. If we allow her to wander around aimlessly outside, it will damage the reputation of Great Yan Imperial Clan. Especially, if she follows Marquis Tianyun to a place like Sher Martial Club, where will the face of His Majesty and all the members of Imperial Clan be? How could a princess of Great Yan do something so outrageous?" The man sighed lightly, picked up a bronze wine vessel and emptied it in one gulp. After that, he continued in an indifferent tone, "For now, we need to find a good candidate among all the nobles in the imperial court, and let Princess Zhanglu marry him. First, we need to establish the official status, then sever the relationship between Princess Zhanglu and some unruly men, so that she won't do anything that will embarrass Great Yan dynasty in the future." Yan Dan frowned slightly, cupped his fist and bowed to the man. "What the great editor said is absolutely right. But, among all the nobles in the imperial court, who is the good candidate?" The current great editor of Great Yan dynasty, Yu Wendi, who had a great influence among all the civil ministers of Great Yan dynasty, and also the birth father of Yu Qianqian, chuckled and said, "That will depend on His Majesty's decision. Great Yan dynasty has so many nobles. Not to mention others, the youngest grandson of General Yu Yi, who is known as the Silver Flood Dragon, the fierce tiger of Qin clan from General Qin Wuyang's clan, the Qilin from General Fan Yuqi's clan, the youngest son of Lord Su Qin, Su Mai, who is known as the ever-changing Yin and Yang, are all good candidates. Betroth Princess Zhanglu to any one of them, it will be a good choice." Yan Dan lightly clapped his hands, nodded his head and praised, "What the great editor said is absolutely right. I, Rong Dan, will give this matter some careful consideration." Yu Wendi did not say another word. With a smile on his face, he filled up his wine vessel, raised it up and looked at the people of Wei Clan, who were staring at the door with their mouths agape, and said, "Isn't it nice to have a friend coming from afar?" Wei Clan, no, it should be Lu Clan, His Majesty of Great Yan Dynasty has been waiting here for a long time. Slowly, Yan Dan rose to his feet. Gray and white smoke rolled and rolled rapidly around his body, transforming into a dense cloud ball that spun at high speed like the Taiji symbol. He looked at the people of Wei Clan, smiled and said, "You have come from afar. Yan Dan is sorry for not going out to welcome you. I wonder if old Mr. Lu Bue is doing well." In Yan Dan's eyes, there was a gray and white airflow swirling at high speed as well. An immense pressure was exerted on the people of Wei Clan, making them unable to move even a little bit. After being trapped at the peak of Jin Dan realm for nearly 2,000 years, Yan Dan had cultivated the reincarnation technique of 9 deaths and 9 lives, which was an extremely magical technique, allowing him to accumulate an enormous amount of core energies. Stimulated by Wu Qi's words, Yan Dan had broken through the bottleneck of Jin Dan realm, stepping into the nascent soul realm in one fell swoop. The core energies that he had accumulated for 2,000 years were like a tsunami, causing his cultivation base to break through to the peak stage of nascent soul realm. On top of that, the reincarnation technique of 9 deaths and 9 lives paid more attention to the tempering of one's nascent divinity. As a result, Yan Dan's divine will had been condensed to the point that it looked almost corporeal. When he unleashed the pressure, it made the people of Wei Clan feel as if a huge rock was pressing down on their chests. Even the few earth immortals of nascent soul realm who came along with them were unable to breathe or move. Wei Xiaoxiao's father cried out sternly, "Yan Dan, how did you know the name of our patriarch?" Yan Dan smiled faintly, shook his head, sighed and said, "Not everyone under the heaven can keep their mouth shut. The few senior managers of your Wei merchant in Ji City are not the kind of people who can face death with equanimity. Don't tell me I can't get any information out of them." He sneered, then a strange gleam flashed in Yan Dan's eyes. He stared at the people of Wei Clan and cried out sternly, "Since you've come today, you can stay here forever." Suddenly, a grayish-white airflow rolled and rocked around him, transforming into a huge hand that measured over 100 feet in circumference, grabbing towards the people of Wei Clan. An earth immortal of Wei Clan took a step forward with blood bursting out from his 7 apertures. He cried out sternly, "Young master, retreat now. I, your old servant, will risk my life to stop this fiend. I hope young master can treat my descendants kindly. I'll be eternally grateful." A golden light burst out from his body, as this earth immortal had ignited his nascent soul. A tremendous force burst out from his body, transforming into a dazzling flame that shot straight towards Yan Dan. Yan Dan's huge hand was shattered, and the pressure from his divine will was shaken as well. Seizing the opportunity, the people of Wei Clan retreated. But, countless strong beams shot out from all directions, as a few layers of entrapment formations were suddenly activated. Chapter 182. While Yan Dan was setting up traps in Ji City to capture the people of Wei Clan, Wu Qi brought Meng Xiaobai and a few other men to the capital city of Gao Ling Kingdom, Green Sun City. Behind the capital city was a small green mountain. The southern foot of the mountain spread out like an arm, and a fertile plain was created by the Silver Sand River. Green Sun City was located right on this plain. As the capital city of a vassal kingdom in the western border, the scale of Green Sun City was far smaller than Ji City. It measured less than 10 miles in both width and length, and together with a few satellite cities and nearly 100 villages outside the city, the population of the people living in this city was less than 1 million. Currently, these 1 million people were squeezed into Green Sun City. They were all given various weapons and armors, and recruited as soldiers to defend the city. Apart from the 1 million militia who had just been armed, there were also less than 37,000 elite soldiers of the Gao Ling Kingdom. With the joint attack of the Lu Kingdom, Lishan Kingdom, and Tai Clan, the army of over 100,000 soldiers of the Gao Ling Kingdom who were confronting the army of Lishan Kingdom at the Changlang River was routed overnight. The army was chased for over 1,000 miles, and only these 30,000 soldiers managed to escape back to Green Sun City. With the joint attack of the three forces, they had annexed 60% of the territory of the Gao Ling Kingdom in just a few months. Now, as long as they could take down Green Sun City, the remaining territory of the Gao Ling Kingdom would no longer have any barrier or defensive force, and the Gao Ling Kingdom would become a name in history. Over the past few months, the emissaries of the Gao Ling Kingdom had been desperately sending letters of complaint to Ji City, asking the suzerain to make a ruling on this matter. However, the person who was responsible for making the ruling on this matter, Lu Qingfeng, the emperor of Zhuo of Great Yan Dynasty, was sitting in the camp of the allied forces. Most of the time, right after the emissaries of the Gao Ling Kingdom sent their letters of complaint to Zhuo, they would be ambushed and killed by the subordinates of Lu Qingfeng who stayed in Ji City. Currently, the Gao Ling Kingdom had no fighting force on the inside, and no reinforcements on the outside. It was at the end of its rope. At the moment, the Gao Ling Kingdom had over 500,000 soldiers besieged Green Sun City. Apart from the direction of Little Green Sun City in the north, the other three directions were completely surrounded. On top of that, these 500,000 soldiers were the most elite soldiers of the Lu Kingdom, Lishan Kingdom, and Tai clan. They were on a completely different level compared to the defeated soldiers and armed militia in Green Sun City. Wu Qi met Lu Qingfeng at the top of a hill on Little Green Mountain, where he could overlook Green Sun City. The two of them were naturally happy to see each other again. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Lu Qingfeng explained the current situation to Wu Qi. As Green Sun City was defending the city with all their might, Lu Qingfeng had already deployed a fire elemental great explosion formation near the city gate. Once it was triggered, the city gate would be blown up into the sky. But now, 7 Jin Dan human immortals from Celestial Spirit sect suddenly appeared in Green Sun City. They claimed that they were taking a temporary rest in Green Sun City, but they had not left even after more than a month. These Jin Dan human immortals with ambiguous attitudes made Lu Qingfeng afraid to make a move. The armies of the Lu Kingdom, the Lishan Kingdom, and the Tai clan did not dare to attack the city. There were 7 Jin Dan human immortals in the city, not 7 Xiantian Taoists. If they were Xiantian warriors, with the joint forces of 3 parties, they could easily crush 7 Xiantian warriors into pieces. But, the Jin Dan human immortals were half-immortal existences, and they were the Jin Dan elders of Heavenly Spirit sect, one of the 13 immortal Dao sects of Great Yan Dynasty. How could a few vassal kingdoms dare to offend them? As long as these 7 Jin Dan human immortals don't leave, the armies can't attack the city. Lu Qingfeng frowned, breathed out a long sigh and said, the Lu Kingdom, the Lishan Kingdom, and the Tai clan do not have a strong foundation. The daily expenditure of 500,000 soldiers is a huge number. If they continue to besiege the city without attacking, the military expenditure will be too much for them to bear. I have no idea where these 7 rascals came from, and what are they doing here in Green Sun City? Wu Qi sneered and said coldly, they are here to receive their great elder, Ling Wuju. That is a smart move. Instead of receiving them openly in the Lu Kingdom, they chose to stay in the capital city of the Gao Ling Kingdom, which is the closest city to Meng Mountains apart from the capital city of the Lu Kingdom. But too bad, their wishful thinking is not going to work now. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi looked at Lu Qingfeng, who had his head filled with confusion, and asked with a smile, is the hidden chess piece I asked you to prepare in place? Lu Qingfeng nodded and said, 70,000 elite soldiers from Brotherhood of Mountains clan have been lying in ambush in Little Green Mountain for 2 months. These barbarians are not easy to deal with. My grandfather has been colluding with them for a long time. This time, with the excuse you made up, he managed to borrow 70,000 elite soldiers from Brotherhood of Mountains clan to attack the Gao Ling Kingdom and divide the loot. These barbarians haven't seen enough gold, silver, and jewelry these days, and they are preparing to return home. Wu Qi sneered, tilted his head up and said in a cold voice, returning home? How can it be so easy? According to the military law of Great Yan, killing barbarians is a meritorious deed. These 70,000 elite soldiers from Brotherhood of Mountains clan were brought here by Wu Qi, so that young master could earn a great meritorious deed, so that he could secure the throne of Zhuoguozheng. Mobilize the elite soldiers from Brotherhood of Mountains clan now, order them to attack the city immediately. As for the 7 Jin Dan human immortals from Heavenly Spirit sect, just leave them to me. Lu Qingfeng was struck dumb with astonishment. He stared blankly at Wu Qi and cried out, "What did you just say?" Wu Qi did not say a word. He pointed his finger out and unleashed the heavenly star positioning disc from his body. It transformed into a jade-colored disc and flew up into the sky, emanating wisps of sharp starlight that brightly illuminated the surroundings. Very soon, stern cries of rebuke echoed out from Green Sun City. 7 bright beams shot up into the sky at top speed, heading towards Wu Qi. Wu Qi cried out sternly, "Mobilize the elite soldiers from Brotherhood of Mountains clan to attack the city. Once they and the defending army in Green Sun City are severely wounded, kill them all. The monarch of the Gao Ling kingdom has colluded with barbarians and harmed the surrounding vassal kingdoms. This crime must be pinned on the head of the royal family of the Gao Ling kingdom. I'll be bringing these 7 useless Jin Dan human immortals with me." Casually calling back the heavenly star positioning disc, Wu Qi stepped on the sword beam and left. The sword of Greedy Wolf flew at an incredible speed. In just a blink of an eye, it had flown several dozens of miles away. The 7 bright beams followed closely behind Wu Qi, not willing to let their guard down. In just the time of a few breaths, the few bright beams had vanished without a trace. A worried expression emerged on Lu Qingfeng's face as he looked at the direction where Wu Qi disappeared. After that, he stamped his foot and cried out sternly, "Beat the drums, sound the bugle, raise the flame as the signal, order the 70,000 soldiers from Brotherhood of Mountains clan to attack the city. Let Marquis Yuanyang send a messenger to tell those barbarians that once Green Sun City is breached, they will have the first pick of all the valuables, and all the women. Anything they fancy will be theirs." Upon hearing the order, all the captains surrounding Lu Qingfeng set out one after another. Marquis Yuanyang, Tai Kaishan, had also immediately sent out his trusted messenger to the valley where the 70,000 soldiers from Brotherhood of Mountains clan were hiding. A few months ago, Marquis Yuanyang had already sent out his absolute trusted messenger to inform the leader of Brotherhood of Mountains clan, who had a long history of friendship with him, inviting him to help him attack the Gao Ling kingdom, and also promised him countless benefits. The leader of Brotherhood of Mountains clan and Marquis Yuanyang's clan had a friendship of over 200 years. As a result, their armors, weapons, provisions, and many other things were all supported by Marquis Yuanyang's clan. Naturally, all the rare and precious items produced in the mountainous area controlled by Brotherhood of Mountains clan would also be supplied to Marquis Yuanyang's clan. The friendship between both clans had a long history, and there was sufficient trust between them. Furthermore, both sides had obtained great benefits from this long history of friendship. Therefore, when Tai Kaishan's messenger left, Brotherhood of Mountains clan immediately sent out their entire clan, forming an army of 70,000 most elite young men and joining the attack on the Gao Ling kingdom. Right now, when Tai Kaishan's messenger left, all the elite soldiers of Brotherhood of Mountains clan who had been staying in the valley for a long time had rushed out in full force. Among the 70,000 barbarian soldiers, 30,000 of them rode on various wild beasts. Amidst the shrill sound of bugles, 30,000 riders took the lead, followed by 40,000 barbarian tribesmen. Mixed among them were nearly 2,000 barbarian beast warriors, who had faint gleams and shadows of wild beasts hovering behind their backs. Not even in their wildest dreams did they expect that right after the 7 human immortals of Jin Dan, the last barrier, had left, the enemy army had already begun to attack the city. But, why was it not the army of Lu Kingdom, Li Shan Kingdom, or Tai clan who came to attack, but these barbarians who had hideous tattoos all over their bodies? Between the Gao Ling Kingdom and Meng Mountains was the Lu Kingdom. Unless the Lu Kingdom was completely wiped out by these barbarians, how could these barbarians appear before Green Sun City? No matter what the people of Gao Ling Kingdom and Green Sun City were thinking, the barbarian soldiers had already begun to attack with all kinds of bizarre abilities. Poisonous prickles swept across the top of Green Sun City like a storm, killing tens of thousands of Gao Ling Kingdom's militiamen on the wall. Their poisonous blood splashed and splashed in all directions, while their bodies quickly shrunk into tiny dark meatballs, looking extremely ferocious and frightening. Those militiamen, who had low morale, were thrown into a panic. Crying and wailing, they fled in all directions. It was a complete mess. Looking at the chaotic scene on the top of the city wall, the captain who commanded the soldiers of Brotherhood of Mountains clan let out a loud howl, ordering his men to rush up the city wall. Among those beast riders, there were several thousand of them who had an amazing jumping ability. With just one leap, they could reach the top of the city wall that was several tens of feet tall. Then, the beast riders rushed up the city wall, slaughtering all the soldiers of Gao Ling Kingdom on top of the wall. Blood flowed like a river, and human heads rolled and rolled. On top of that, there were nearly 2,000 barbarian beast warriors. These were all formidable warriors who could rival Xiantian experts after activating their beast souls. With nearly 2,000 Xiantian warriors, Green Sun City no longer had the strength to resist. Perhaps those wealthy clans of Gao Ling Kingdom who were hiding in Green Sun City could still gather quite a number of Xiantian warriors and Xiantian cultivators as sinecures, but these sinecures were used to protect their own lives. How could they let them fight on top of the city wall? Not long after that, the army of 70,000 barbarians had broken through the 4 city gates of Green Sun City and entered the city. The allied army of 3 forces, consisting of 500,000 soldiers, was quickly mobilized, surrounding Green Sun City from all directions. After that, with a thought in his mind, Lu Qingfeng performed an incantation gesture, triggering the many great explosive formations that had been lying in ambush near the city gate. A frightening explosion towered up into the sky. Flames and dust swept across the land for about 1 mile. Tens of thousands of barbarian soldiers and Gao Ling Kingdom soldiers were caught in the explosion, dying tragically on the spot. A deafening war bugle rang out, as the allied army of 3 forces, consisting of 500,000 soldiers, charged into Green Sun City with the butcher's blades in their hands. Countless captains of the allied army were roaring and roaring amidst the crowd. The Gao Ling Kingdom has colluded with the barbarians and attacked our ally. They deserve to die 1,000 deaths. You can kill any man of great yen. Kill, kill, kill. Break into Green Sun City and annihilate the Gao Ling Kingdom. Green Sun City was breached, and the royal family of Gao Ling Kingdom surrendered themselves to the enemy. But, on the same night, because of an accident in the captive camp, the entire royal family of Gao Ling Kingdom was burned to a crisp. The enormous wealth accumulated by the Gao Ling Kingdom over the several hundred years of its establishment was divided equally among the 3 forces. The properties of the many influential and wealthy clans of Gao Ling Kingdom filled the pockets of the allied army of 500,000 soldiers, turning them into small rich men. While the people of Gao Ling Kingdom were wailing and wailing, the soldiers and civilians of the 3 forces were laughing joyfully. The gold mines on the Tsanglang River were taken over by the 3 forces, and the land of Gao Ling Kingdom was quickly dismembered, becoming the food for the 3 forces. A piece of land was taken away from the Lu Kingdom, and together with the land they obtained from the Gao Ling Kingdom, Tai clan, Marquis Yuanyang, had established their own vassal kingdom, and quickly presented a letter of credence to the Emperor of Zhuoguozheng, Lu Qingfeng, declaring allegiance to Great Yen Dynasty. In just 15 minutes, the Yuanyang Kingdom established by Tai clan had completed all the legal procedures, becoming one of the over 100 vassal kingdoms of Great Yen Dynasty. As long as Tai Kaishan paid a visit to Yandan in Ji City, Yuanyang Kingdom would officially become a vassal kingdom of Great Yen Dynasty. As for the Gao Ling Kingdom, what was the Gao Ling Kingdom? Had this vassal kingdom ever existed? Chapter 183. A very faint black beam streaked across the mountaintop like a mist. Those with weaker cultivation base could not even see the shadow of this black beam. Riding on the sword of Greedy Wolf, Wu Qi sped back into the Meng Mountains where he had just come out from. Then, he flew straight into the depths of Meng Mountains without bothering about anything. 7 dazzling beams, each measuring 30 to 50 feet long, followed behind Wuqi in an arrogant manner, looking like the rainbow after the rain. Their speed was slightly faster than Wuqi's, and they were getting closer to Wuqi at all times. However, it seemed like it would take them more than 20 hours of long-distance flight to catch up with Wuqi. The reason was that Wuqi's flying speed was just a tiny bit slower than them, an insignificant tiny bit. After flying several thousand miles into the depths of Meng Mountains, a furious roar was heard coming from one of the beams. "Hey, you, stop right now. How did you get your hands on the heavenly star positioning disc? If you don't tell me the truth, I'll spare your puny life." Without turning his head back, Wuqi cried out sternly, "Bullshit. Spare my puny life? Thank you, but no need. As long as your Lord Wuqi is not willing to give me my life, no one can take it away from me." Just like Ling Wujiu and the other 4 idiots, they failed to kill me, but were severely wounded by a group of demon beasts. Now, they have become the lucky ones. Laughing strangely, Wuqi cried out again, "You bastards, stop chasing me. You can't catch up with me." Ha ha ha, Meng Mountains are filled with powerful demon beasts. They have no interest in me, a puny Xiantian Taoist, but they are very interested in the flesh and blood of Jin Dan human immortals. You are just a dish delivered to my doorstep. You better stop chasing me. Wuqi told the cultivators behind him not to give chase. However, would the 7 human immortals from Heavenly Spirit sect, Jin Dan, give up? After Yen Dan brutally killed more than a dozen Jin Dan elders, the Heavenly Spirit sect was exasperated and sent out 5 Jin Dan elders to kill Wuqi, the culprit. As a result, the 5 Jin Dan elders did not receive any news for a few months. That was why the 7 of them were sent out as reinforcements. He had waited in Green Sun City for a few months, but Ling Wujiu and the others did not return. Instead, he saw Wuqi carrying the heavenly star positioning plate and showing off his prowess. If they did not catch up with Wuqi and interrogate him about what had happened, how could these 7 human immortals of Jin Dan sect let him go? He had to catch up with Wuqi and tear him to pieces. Then, he would use a secret technique to interrogate his soul and ask him what had happened. Ling Wujiu and the others were severely wounded by the demon beasts. That was the reason why Wuqi was able to take advantage of them. It sounded very reasonable, but these 7 immortals were not willing to believe it. 5 Jin Dan elders were not 5 ordinary disciples. The loss they suffered was too great. No matter whether what Wuqi said was true or not, they had to capture him alive. Otherwise, they would not be able to explain themselves when they returned. Of course, the temptation of the heavenly star positioning plate was too great. It was the cornerstone treasure of Heavenly Spirit sect, and it had always been held in the hands of Ling Wujiu. Even the current sect leader could not lay his hands on it. If Ling Wujiu was really dead, the heavenly star positioning plate would belong to whoever snatched it back. Amidst one of the bright beams, the hoarse voice of an old lady echoed out abruptly, "Junior brothers, let's catch up and avenge senior brother Ling. The most important thing is to seize back the cornerstone treasure of our sect. As I am the oldest among all the disciples, I will keep the heavenly star positioning plate for the time being." Right after the old lady's voice faded, a cold snort was heard coming from the other 6 bright beams at the same time. Abruptly, the few bright beams sped up a little, chasing after Wuqi with a faint blood-red hue. After hearing the old lady's words, these people actually exercised a mystic technique and burned their blood essence, using the most damaging method to control the talisman treasures under their feet, chasing after Wuqi at the fastest speed. The old lady snorted coldly in anger. Hastily, she too sprayed out a mouthful of blood essence onto the talisman treasures under her feet, and increased the speed of the bright beam. Wuqi kept running crazily, purposely looking for the direction of those barren hills and unruly rivers. After running for another 2,000 miles, the 7 Jin Dan human immortals of Heavenly Spirit sect were now less than 1,000 feet behind him. The energy ripples burst out from the 7 talisman treasures and surged toward him like a landslide or a tsunami. The tremendous energy ripples made the natural energy around Wuqi ripple, and the difficulty of his flight increased by a few times. Have a taste of my magical treasures. Abruptly, Wuqi raised his right hand and threw 3 explosive talismans behind him. Upon hearing that, the 7 bright beams stopped abruptly. The talisman treasures quickly absorbed the natural energy from the surroundings, forming into a thick layer of defensive barrier around everyone's body. Countless streams of light were hovering in the air, different sized spell symbols were faintly discernible in the light screen. 3 small balls of fiery light exploded powerlessly on the defensive mechanism, they couldn't even create a slight ripple on the defensive mechanism transformed from the talisman treasure. For a long while, the 7 Jin Dan elders of Heavenly Spirit sect did not say a word. After a full 2 breaths of time, the old lady roared furiously, "How dare you bully me, little boy? I was able to craft these explosive talismans when I was only 7 years old, and now, I'm over 700 years old. How dare you attack me with them? You are infuriating me." The 7 bright beams sped up and chased after Wuqi. Meanwhile, Wuqi was laughing all the way and said, 700 years old, and you are still a little Jin Dan elder? I heard that a Jin Dan human immortal only has a lifespan of 800 years. Unless he cultivates some special cultivation technique to prolong his lifespan, or takes some spirit pills that can prolong his lifespan, otherwise, he will immediately kick the bucket when he reaches 800 years old. Old fool, doesn't that mean you are going to die soon? The old lady let out a hoarse and angry roar. The bright beam of her fleeing beam became more and more dazzling, as she chased after Wuqi like a shooting star. The other 6 Jin Dan elders of Heavenly Spirit sect were worried that the old lady might gain some benefits and really allow her to seize the Heavenly Star positioning disc. Hastily, they coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood essence, activated their prime talisman treasures, and increased their speed by a few times. This was the disadvantage of the cultivation technique of Heavenly Spirit sect. Although the talisman treasures were powerful, they consumed too much of their innate energy and energy essence. In order to catch up with Wuqi as soon as possible, they had consumed a huge amount of blood essence. Riding on the sword beam, he flew several dozens of miles forward. When he saw that the 7 strange beams were less than 300 feet away from him, he suddenly fished out several hundred explosive talismans from his storage ring. Using the most panicked and helpless voice that could only be uttered by a weak little girl who had bumped into several thousand perverts, he roared, "I'll fight you to the death. Look at the magical treasures. Look at the magical treasures." While shouting, "Look at the magical treasures," Wuqi kept throwing out explosive talismans one after another. He had bought quite a lot of these explosive talismans in Ji City, and Ling Wujiu and the others also had quite a few in their storage items. Therefore, even though Wuqi threw out 100 to 200 explosive talismans at a time, he did not feel any heartache at all. The few Jin Dan elders of Heavenly Spirit sect sneered together. The sky was filled with water tank-sized fireballs produced by the explosions of these explosive talismans. But, how could these fireballs hurt them? There were also a few Jin Dan elders who were showing off their attainments in talismans. With a light touch of their fingers, they completely destroyed several hundred explosive talismans. Before they could explode, the meridians of energy circulation in them had been completely destroyed, turning them into waste paper. A dark beam was seen flying at high speed in the front, followed by 7 bright beams. Between the 2 of them were countless exploding fireballs and the occasional broken red specks. Amidst the loud rumbling noises, the group had come quite a distance away from Meng Mountains. Once again, Wuqi pulled out a great number of explosive talismans and threw them behind him, then roared, "Look at the magical treasures, look at the magical treasures. I have countless explosive talismans with me. Let's see how much energy you can use to resist them." The group of Jin Dan elders of Heavenly Spirit sect kept sneering. Explosive talismans were the most basic offensive talismans. Unless there were tens of thousands of them exploding around them at the same time, how could they possibly hurt them? To them, these explosive talismans were just toys for children, and they were not even considered as toys. Just like what the old lady said, when she was 7 years old, she could already draw an explosive talisman. By the time Wu Qi had thrown out over 3,000 explosive talismans, Wu Qi's voice had turned hoarse. What he threw out was still an endless stream of explosive talismans, yet they did not even hurt the skin of those Jin Dan elders. Suddenly, Wu Qi halted his sword beams. He cried out with a stern voice, "I'll fight you to the death. Let me show you my strongest magical treasure, 30,000 explosive talismans. Do you think I can't kill all of you?" The group of Jin Dan elders of Heavenly Spirit sect burst into laughter. 30,000 explosive talismans? They were not afraid at all. When they saw Wu Qi's sword beams halted, their eyes shone brightly. Wu Qi must have run out of innate energy, and could no longer run away. As a junior of Xiantian realm, it was an extremely rare feat for him to fly over 10,000 miles with a sword, and he could be considered as having a vigorous innate energy. All 7 talisman treasures flashed with bright gleams at the same time. Without prior consultation, 7 Jin Dan elders exercised a restrictive technique and grabbed towards Wu Qi, determined to capture him alive. Not only did they not take any precaution, they even put 99% of their attention on their fellow disciples. They wanted to capture Wu Qi alive, and at the same time, they had to make sure that no one could capture Wu Qi alive. Therefore, they did not pay any attention to Wu Qi's little trick. Soundlessly, the cold electric mirror emerged behind Wu Qi's back, and several hundred tiny electric arcs tore the void apart soundlessly. Amidst a faint gleam, the gold coin shot up into the sky, shooting out from the eye of the coin and piercing towards the talisman treasures beneath their feet, weakening the connection between their divine sense and talisman treasures. Amidst a blinding golden gleam, the gold ingot flew up into the sky, transforming into a small golden mountain, measuring several hundred feet in circumference, and smashed down from above. Although it weighed several 100,000 kilograms, it was still quite a deterrent. The strong wind brought up by the gold ingot made the clothes of the 7 elders flutter violently, while their bodies, together with their talisman treasures, were forced to descend by a few feet. After that, the sword of greedy wolf came whistling out. Accompanied by a jarring howl of a wolf, 7 pitch-black wolf heads opened their big mouths and bit towards the vital parts of the 7 elders. Finally, the silver lotus flew up soundlessly with an indescribable elegance, tightly wrapping around Wu Qi and protecting him within its stamen. A soundless explosion rang out, as the bright light shrouding the 7 Jin Dan elders shattered abruptly. The electric arcs unleashed by the cold electric mirror had shattered their defensive light, and ripped their bodies into pieces. For early-stage Jin Dan elders did not even have the chance to let out a snort before their bodies were ripped to shreds, leaving only 4 Jin Dan stones behind. A bright gleam shone from the gold ingot, as 6 talisman treasures fell quietly to the ground. The gold ingot came pressing down heavily. The other 3 Jin Dan elders, whose fleshly bodies only had a small part of their bodies ripped apart, let out a miserable howl as they were smashed down by the gold ingot. Apart from a skinny and withered old lady, the other 2 Jin Dan elders had more than half of their fleshly bodies ripped apart. The sword of greedy wolf thrust forward with a jarring whistle, wiping out the blood and chi essence of 6 Jin Dan elders, who had their fleshly bodies ripped apart. 6 Jin Dan stones were rolled up by the sword beam, falling into Wu Qi's hand. At this moment, the attacks unleashed by the few talisman treasures finally landed on Wu Qi's body, but they were firmly blocked by the silver lotus. None of them could hurt even a single hair of his. Wu Qi flew up and came next to the old lady, who was now covered in blood and screaming in fear. Casually, he performed a hand incantation gesture and completely sealed off her cultivation base. Casually, he brought the 7 talisman treasures into his storage ring, then Wu Qi gave the old lady a series of slaps. "Alright, when you were chasing after me just now, you didn't look so panicked." Coldly, Wu Qi stared at the old lady, who had a gloomy and unsightly face and a pair of eyes filled with an evil gleam. Shaking his head, he sneered and said, "I only have one question for you. Who constructed the teleportation formation that you used?" The old lady stared at Wu Qi for a while, then breathed out a heavy sigh and said, "Spare me a thread of my soul for reincarnation, and I'll tell you the truth." Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then nodded and said, "Fine." Who constructed the second teleportation formation of Great Yen Dynasty? The old lady stared at Wu Qi coldly, sneered and said, Myriad Dao Alliance. If you have the ability, go and find them. Wu Qi was struck dumb. Myriad Dao Alliance, what kind of organization was this? Chapter 184. After tidying up the belongings of 7 Jin Dan human immortals, emptying 7 storage rings and hanging them around his neck, Wu Qi flew out of Meng Mountains on his flying sword, heading to Green Sun City to meet up with Lu Qingfeng. Green Sun City had been completely wiped out, and a new grand city would be built here. In the future, it would be the capital city of Tai Clan's Yuanyang Kingdom. According to the agreement made by the 3 kingdoms, the Lu Kingdom and Lishan Kingdom would bear 70% of the cost of building the new city. Wu Qi helped Lu Qingfeng with some affairs for a few days, and when everything was settled, the company took a detour to the capital city of Lu Kingdom, returning to Great Yen Dynasty with the teleportation formation there. At this point in time, Great Yen Dynasty had begun to use the spatial breaching spirit gold in the teleportation formations of various vassal kingdoms. When Wu Qi and his company returned to Ji City, the amount of natural energy consumed by the teleportation formation had been reduced by 100 times. As a result, the teleportation formation, which consisted of several thousand people, did not need to replace any energy stones. When they walked out from the teleportation formation located in the southwestern barbican of the Imperial Palace of Ji City, a heavy snow was falling from the sky. The snowflakes kept falling onto Wu Qi's body and head, and the cool snowflakes made Wu Qi's spirit feel refreshed. He took a deep breath and breathed out a mouthful of baiqi, sending it flying far away. While he was inhaling and exhaling, Wu Qi quickly ran his eyes over those Jin Dan human immortals who were on duty in the barbican. Just as he expected, when these Jin Dan human immortals saw Lu Qingfeng and his company, their expressions turned normal. But, when a few of them saw Wu Qi, their faces turned stiff abruptly. Some of them even tried to suppress their emotions, but still, Wu Qi could clearly sense the killing intent in their hearts. According to the old lady from Heavenly Spirit Sect, who was captured alive and interrogated by Wu Qi, these Jin Dan human immortals should be the people from Myriad Dao Alliance of Great Yen Dynasty. They should know that Heavenly Spirit Sect had sent Elder Jin Dan to hunt down Wu Qi. Therefore, when they saw Wu Qi return to Ji City safe and sound, they were so surprised, and revealed a murderous intent toward Wu Qi. Myriad Dao Alliance was a loose alliance formed by the strongest group of cultivators from 13 immortal Dao sects of Great Yen Dynasty. Putting aside the heaven-breaking sword sect, which was established only 600 years ago, a few of the 13 immortal sects of Great Yen Dynasty were established since the founding of Great Yen Dynasty. Over 2,000 years was more than enough for these sects to cultivate a large number of earth immortals of nascent soul realm. According to the law of Great Yen Dynasty, when a new earth immortal of nascent soul realm was born in any sect, he or she would have to leave his or her original sect and join the Cloud Swallow Pavilion of Great Yen Dynasty, becoming a sinecure of the Imperial Clan of Great Yen Dynasty. According to the way Great Yen Dynasty strictly controlled the immortal sects, among these earth immortals, 60% of them had the bloodline of Great Yen Dynasty's Imperial Clan. Therefore, they were easy to control. Meanwhile, among the other 40%, over 20% came from the clans of Jing Ku, Qin Wuyang, Gao Jianli, and some other influential ministers. Their loyalty was beyond doubt. However, there were still nearly 20% of Earth Immortals who did not belong to the Imperial Clan, nor did they come from influential clans. Just like Nie Yaonu, her childhood sweetheart and first love who died inexplicably, these Earth Immortals were born as commoners. However, because of their outstanding innate talent in cultivation, they were chosen to join the immortal Dao sects. In their sects, they were often suppressed by their fellow disciples who came from the Imperial Clan and influential clans. Some of them were even nearly assassinated. After going through untold hardships and attaining the cultivation base of Earth Immortals, these people were all men with unswerving willpower and outstanding innate talent. It was imaginable how difficult it was for Great Yen Dynasty to completely control these people. Although these people had left their own sects, there were always disciples who had a close relationship with them. How could Great Yen Dynasty possibly take away the relationship of a master and a disciple? These Earth Immortals who were discontented with Great Yen Dynasty had banded together and formed a semi-public alliance of cultivators, the Myriad Dao Alliance. Generally speaking, the higher-ups of Great Yen Dynasty, including Yen Dan, were happy to see the existence of the Myriad Dao Alliance. In many ways, this loose alliance had played a positive role for Great Yen Dynasty. However, there was always a shadow under the bright sunlight. No one knew what those Earth Immortals in the Myriad Dao Alliance were thinking. The second set of teleportation formations that densely covered all vassal kingdoms of Great Yen Dynasty was secretly constructed by some powerful, influential, and powerful Earth Immortals from the Myriad Dao Alliance. Yen Dan and the others knew about the existence of this second set of teleportation formations, but they had no way of controlling it. These teleportation formations were located in remote and desolate places outside all the major cities of Great Yen Dynasty, and their locations would change from time to time. Even with the all-pervasive methods of Scouting Office, Swallow, and many other secret organizations, they still could not find out the operation method of this teleportation formation system. All Earth Immortals of nascent soul realm possessed the ability to search one's soul. Therefore, it was impossible for them to find out the truth even if they sent some undercover agents. When Wu Qi stepped forward and annihilated Wei Merchant, he had destroyed a major source of wealth for Heavenly Spirit Sect. Not only had he offended the current sect leader and many elders of Heavenly Spirit Sect, he had also angered some Earth Immortals from Heavenly Spirit Sect. Furthermore, among the 13 Jin Dan sect elders who were killed, 2 of them were the direct bloodline descendants of some Earth Immortals who stayed in Heavenly Spirit Sect. As a result, this gruesome debt of blood was placed on Wu Qi's head. Faced with the confession of the old lady, Wu Qi could only raise his head and look into the sky. The heaven was speechless. There was no rumbling thunder in winter or snowfall in June, and no one was crying out for Wu Qi. Yen Dan had forcefully pushed the credit of annihilating Wei Merchant onto Wu Qi's head. Therefore, he had no choice but to take the blame, even if he did not want to. After all, those Earth Immortals of Myriad Dao Alliance did not have the confidence to challenge the entire Great Yen Dynasty represented by Yen Dan. But, strangling Wu Qi to death was just like playing a game. That was the reason why Ling Wujiu and 5 other Jin Dan sect human immortals went after Wu Qi with their sect guarding treasure. As a result, the teleportation formation of Myriad Dao Alliance was open to them, and that was the reason why Wu Qi was besieged by Jin Dan sect human immortals in the depth of Meng Mountains. If not for the fact that Wu Qi had countless trump cards, he would have long been crushed into ashes. Looking at the few Jin Dan sect human immortals who had an unsightly expression on their faces, Wu Qi's mind was filled with all sorts of thoughts. After a long while, Wu Qi suddenly screamed, "I demand an audience with His Majesty. I demand an audience with His Majesty. Your humble servant, Wu Qi, Marquis Tianyun, requests an audience with His Majesty." Wu Qi roared at the top of his voice. With his current cultivation base, the rolling sound waves spread across the entire imperial palace in an instant, shaking the walls of the Barbican and sending the thick layer of snow on the ground flying far away. Chaos ensued everywhere. From the top of the city wall, the watchtowers, and the turrets, countless powerful bows and crossbows were aimed at Wu Qi, while several dozens of Jin Dan imperial guards flew up into the sky on their flying swords. One of them, a peak-level imperial guard of Jin Dan sect, clad in the uniform of an imperial eunuch, snapped sternly, "How dare you? Do you know where this place is? Is it a place where you can shout and shout?" On the other side, another imperial guard of Jin Dan sect pointed his finger at Wu Qi and roared furiously, "Somebody, arrest this lawless Marquis Tianyun, who dares to disturb His Majesty. According to the law of Great Yen, he will be beaten 300 times with a stick." What a bastard! How dare a mere Marquis Tianyun act so presumptuously in the imperial palace? Wu Qi gave the 2 eunuchs a glare. Then, he mustered all his energy, and under the panicked gazes of Lu Qingfeng and the others, he roared out word by word, "Daqin iron armor, Ingzheng, Daqin Army's Grand Marshal, Wuan, Wang Baiqi, Daqin's Chief Minister, Su Fu, Daqin's Prime Minister, Li Si, Daqin's generals, Wang Jian, Li Xian. The two Jin Dan sect eunuchs who were flying on their flying swords became more and more furious, and at the same time, more panicked. They pointed their fingers at Wu Qi and roared furiously, how presumptuous. You, what kind of nonsense are you talking about? Marquis Tianyun, are you out of your mind, or have you lost your mind? Somebody, bring Marquis Tianyun down. Bring him down. Give him 300 beatings, then find a doctor. Before the scolding of two eunuchs could fade away, a strong gust of wind rolled up from the ground. Yan Dan, Jing Ke, Gao Jianli, and all the core members of Great Yan Dynasty appeared in the barbican. Ma Yi, who was following closely behind Yan Dan, threw a sideways glance at the two Jin Dan sect eunuchs hovering in midair, then cried out sternly, "Get your asses down here. What are you doing up there? Enforce a curfew, and don't allow any unauthorized people to enter or leave this place. Anyone who dares to intrude will be killed." A large group of secret agents of Great Yan Dynasty, who were under the direct control of Gao Jianli, arrived at the barbican. They replaced the guards and took over the defense of the barbican. Apart from Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng, all the other attendants were driven out of the barbican. When the surrounding area was cleared, Yan Dan came before Wu Qi. With a gloomy face, he stared at him and cried out in a low voice, "What did you say just now?" "Wu Qi, you little rascal, what nonsense are you talking about? You've been away for a few months, and what have you encountered? Are you really suffering from hysteria, or what?" Yan Dan's body was trembling. He clenched his fists tightly and fixed his eyes on Wu Qi. A tremendous pressure was bursting out from his body. Standing next to him, Lu Qingfeng had already dropped to his knees and bowed respectfully to Yan Dan. Meanwhile, Wu Qi rolled his eyes and stared at Yan Dan, clenched his jaws and raised a finger. "Unless your majesty can guarantee the absolute safety of Wu Qi in Great Yan, Wu Qi knows nothing." What Ingzheng? What 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic? What Bone Horn of Ing Dragon? What Water Spirit Cauldron the Great? Yan Dan was stunned. The corner of his mouth twitched a few times, then he said coldly, "Who wants to kill you?" Wu Qi looked at Yan Dan and snorted coldly, "I don't know who wants to kill me in Myriad Dao Alliance, but Heavenly Spirit Sect has sent someone to hunt down Wu Qi. I believe your majesty does not know about this, but I hope something like this will not happen again in the future." Without being urged by Yan Dan, Wu Qi used the most concise words to tell Yan Dan about how he was hunted down by the elders of Heavenly Spirit Sect in Meng Mountains. Of course, he used the spring and autumn period technique to omit a lot of shameful things, such as his secret palace, and so on. Looking at Yan Dan, who had an unsightly expression on his face, he said coldly, "No matter what, Wu Qi has made so many meritorious deeds, and is even conferred the title of Marquis Tianyun by your majesty. Not only that, his fief has been increased, and now, he owns 300 cities south of Huaiyang. Elder Jin Dan of Heavenly Spirit Sect is hunting me, and the nascent soul patriarch of Myriad Dao Alliance also wants my life. I fear that I will be strangled to death by those earth immortals once I step out of the imperial palace. Therefore, I can only beg your majesty to save me." Yan Dan pondered for a brief moment, then nodded his head, smiled and said, "Heavenly Spirit Sect is so audacious to hunt you down. This is the first time I've heard about this. Don't worry, no matter who is the one who has deceived me and kept me from knowing about this, I'll find him and uphold justice for you. But, how did you escape from the pursuit of 12 human immortals of Jin Dan?" Without wasting any time, Wu Qi took out the medallion given to him by Wanying Dragon King and handed it over to Yan Dan. Sure enough, Yan Dan could recognize this medallion. He laughed and said, "So, you are the old dragon who refused to take the position of Great Yan Dynasty's sinecure. I don't need to tell you. Was he the one who helped you kill those people from Heavenly Spirit Sect? I understand now." Wu Qi was laughing in his mind, "You should know this yourself, but Wu Qi never told me that." After a brief moment of pondering, Yen Dan nodded his head and said, I understand the cause and effect of this incident. I'll personally warn some people, and they will never touch even a single hair of yours again. Now, let's talk about that Ing. Sheng. Yen Dan fixed his eyes on Wu Qi, while Jing Ke, Gao Jianli, and a few others strode up to him. Like a pack of ferocious wild cats, they surrounded Wu Qi, the little mouse. The eyes of these few core members of Great Yen Dynasty were glowing green, and they were emanating an abnormal and bizarre aura. Not daring to waste any more time, Wu Qi hastily told them the cause and effect of the incident. Of course, he still omitted most of the truth with the style of the spring and autumn period, but only highlighted how he had racked his brains, using the conflict between Qin army and Wanying Dragon King to kill a great number of Qin soldiers and severely injuring Zheng. Yen Dan stared blankly at Wu Qi, then asked hurriedly, Did you really severely injuring Zheng? And even wiped out his army of over 100,000 soldiers? Wu Qi kept nodding his head, hastily swearing a few vicious oaths, then said with a little shyness, Everything is true. It's just that I didn't contribute much in this incident, as it was all Wanying Dragon King's effort. TSK, over 1 million aquatic demons from Longyuan River have been killed or wounded. What a miserable fate. Yen Dan let out a wild laugh. He reached out his hand and forcefully poked Wu Qi's chest, laughed out loud and said, Announce the decree, Wu Qi will be promoted to the title of Duke of Tianyun. Announce the decree, whoever kills 10,000 soldiers of Qin army will be conferred the title of Marquis, and whoever kills 100,000 soldiers of Qin army will be conferred the title of Duke. Those who severely injure the emperor and his ministers of Qin army, and those who kill the famous generals and ministers of Qin army will be rewarded handsomely. Wu Qi immediately stuck out his chest. He was conferred the title of Duke just like that. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.